Chapter 749. Fortunately, it's not contagious. I really thought it was contagious when I saw third sister's face. Just now, I saw that the nanny in charge and several maids were so scared that they stepped back. Even the Imperial physician stepped forward cautiously. Only Big Sister held the three sisters tightly. Now you feed them the decoction in person. You're really considerate, Xiao Wanru said with a smile, with a trace of fear. She was the youngest of the sisters, so her fearful look was quite adorable. She was not as bright and beautiful as she was in the past, but more childish, as if she was really frightened. Xiao Zaihuan was attracted by her appearance at first, and then she suddenly turned her head, looked at Xiao Yanru angrily, gritted her teeth and said with hatred, "Big sister, I don't know when you've been so kind." She inexplicably got red spots all over her body, which was painful and itchy. Even she didn't know whether it was contagious. In particular, the Imperial physician was very careful before treating her. How could Xiao Yanru suddenly be so kind to her? She didn't avoid the possibility that she might be contagious and took the initiative to serve her. Outsiders might think that Xiao Yanru was indeed such a dignified, decent and protective sister. No matter whether she would be hurt or not, she would protect her sister. Xiao Tahuan was a member of Duke Xing's mansion, and the third branch had always been suppressed by the second branch. Among the sisters of Duke Xing's mansion, Xiao Yanru was a powerful one, and no one dared to provoke her. They all knew that this big sister was very cruel and merciless. Besides, she was good at doing things behind others' backs. If Xiao Zaihuan might really be contagious, Xiao Yanru wouldn't have approached her at all, let alone held Xiao Zaihuan and cried. She even wiped the red spots in person. How could Xiao Yanru do such a thing, unless she knew that these were not poisonous? But how could she know? If she didn't participate in it, how could she know? It was normal for others to avoid it, but Xiao Yanru was abnormal. It must be her who wanted to hurt her. As for why, Xiao Zaihuan immediately thought of the reason. Now the backyard of Duke Xing's mansion was under her mother's control. Xiao Yanru was not convinced, so she did this. Xiao Tahuan was so angry that her fingers trembled slightly. In her excitement, Xiao Zaihuan had forgotten her mother's instructions and slapped Xiao Yanru hard in the face. She couldn't bear the fact that she might be disfigured for a while. At this time, she finally found a way to vent her anger. "Xiao Yanru, you bitch! How dare you set me up like this? If I don't tear your face apart, let's see how you can go out and hook up with other people." Xiao Yanru wavered between Prince Yu and Prince Zhou. Xiao Zaihuan also learned from the third madam that the third branch naturally participated in the discussion, which was related to the choice of the whole Duke Xing's mansion. In fact, it was not Xiao Yanru's problem alone. But now Xiao Zaihuan had no time to care about it. She raised her hand, grabbed Xiao Yanru's hair bun, and pulled it over fiercely. Xiao Yanru didn't expect that Xiao Zaihuan would suddenly go crazy. She was caught off guard and her scalp hurt because of the pull. Seeing that the situation was not good, Shuqi hurriedly came over and pulled Xiao Zaihuan's hand. However, Xiao Zaihuan, who had determined that she was set up and that Xiao Yanru was also involved, refused to let go. She desperately tried to stretch out the other hand to scratch Xiao Yanru's face, but her hand was held tightly by Shuqi, who prevented her from touching Xiao Yanru. Xiao Yanru took advantage of the time when Shuqi held Xiao Zaihuan's hand and pinched the back of Xiao Zaihuan's other hand hard. Xiao Zaihuan felt the pain and her hand went limp. Xiao Yanru staggered away from the edge of the bed and fell to the ground in embarrassment. "What's going on?" The nanny in charge came in because the sound of fighting inside was too loud. As soon as she came in, she saw Xiao Zaihuan struggling on the bed and trying to pounce on Xiao Yanru. Then she saw that Xiao Yanru's hair was messy and there was a palm print on her white and tender face. She fell to the ground full of water and even her clothes were dirty. She immediately flew into a rage. "Nanny, she set me up. She set me up. Please help me." Xiao Zaihuan calmed down a little and cried loudly to the nanny in charge. She glared at Xiao Yanru with resentment. If it weren't for Shuqi holding her tightly, she would have pounced on the ground and scratched Xiao Yanru's face. Anyway, it was impossible for her to participate in the show anymore, so they didn't have to do it anymore. Xiao Yanru didn't expect such a change. She had intended to dispel Xiao Zaihuan's suspicion, but she didn't expect that Xiao Zaihuan would make herself look like this. But now it was not the time to quarrel with Xiao Zaihuan. She looked up at Xiao Zaihuan with tears in her eyes and said, "Third sister, what are you doing? Why did you suddenly become like this? Could it be that you..." Xiao Yinru shrank back timidly when she said this. The meaning of her words was clear even if it was not clear. She meant that Xiao Zaihuan couldn't stand the blow and suddenly went crazy. The nanny in charge looked at Xiao Yinru and then at Xiao Zaihuan, who was about to pounce on Xiao Zaihuan crazily. Xiao Zaihuan really looked like a crazy woman. Coupled with the red marks on her face, the beauty on her face had already been swollen. She looked like she was really crazy. "Someone," the nanny in charge said coldly and was about to ask someone to gag Xiao Zaihuan's mouth. A miss who couldn't participate in the show and was not the main branch of Duke Xing's mansion was not a big deal. If she behaved well, she could be sent out of the mansion by the Imperial physician. If she was in such a state, it was not a big deal to gag her mouth and throw her out of the palace. "Third sister, if you continue to do this, Nanny will really think that you are crazy. There is no need to investigate what will happen next. Third sister will also be thrown out of the palace." Xiao Wanru raised her eyes and looked at Xiao Zaihuan calmly. When the two sisters were fighting, she didn't step forward but just looked at them quietly with a trace of darkness flashing across her eyes. Xiao Yinru must have known about it and even planned it, but did Xiao Zaihuan really know nothing about it? Her watery eyes glanced over the bed, which was messy because of the fight, and a familiar thing appeared under the pillow of the bed. Although it was only a corner, Xiao Wanru immediately recognized that it was a protective talisman. Protective talismans were usually hung on the body, so how could they only be placed at the head of the bed? However, since it was placed at the head of the bed, it meant that Xiao Zaihuan didn't know much about it and thought that it would be fine as long as she didn't wear it. The protective talisman, which she had painstakingly asked for and spent a lot of money on, was just placed under the pillow. It was really hard to believe what Xiao Zaihuan had said to her before. The two protective talismans were drugged together. In order to keep the matter confidential, she naturally couldn't let Xiao Zaihuan know. Although her protective talisman was drugged, so was Xiao Zaihuan's protective talisman. Wang Yusen must have come to find her, and then she took the opportunity to put the incense in her incense burner, so that she would be the victim. Unfortunately, she hadn't come back yet. Wang Yusen should have been to Xiao Yinru's room. Xiao Yinru was afraid of getting into trouble, so she asked her to go to Xiao Zaihuan's room, and then when she came back, she invited her over. Wang Yusen had been drugged in Xiao Zaihuan's room, so Xiao Yinru couldn't be blamed for it. From this, it could be concluded that Wang Yusen didn't know that the real mastermind behind it was Xiao Yinru, so that when she couldn't enter her room, she went to Xiao Zaihuan's room and put the incense in it instead of putting it in her incense burner. Everyone knew something more or less, but it was not comprehensive, so that the whole thing had nothing to do with the mastermind. Of course, if Xiao Yinru hadn't been too eager to show her sisterhood with Xiao Zaihuan just now, Xiao Zaihuan wouldn't have found out. In the past, even if Xiao Zaihuan found out that Xiao Yinru had done something in it, she didn't dare to do anything to Xiao Yinru face to face. But today, Xiao Zaihuan was out of control. At this time, any little suspicion could be infinitely magnified. Xiao Wanru was waiting for this opportunity. She took a few steps forward, took Xiao Zaihuan's hand from Shuqi's, and warned her, "Third sister, if you want to avenge yourself and ask for an explanation, you must calm down. This is the Imperial Palace, not Duke Xing's mansion." Her cold eyes fell on Xiao Zaihuan's face. There seemed to be ice and snow in her eyes. Seeing her figure in those bright watery eyes, Xiao Zaihuan couldn't help shuddering and immediately sobered up. Looking at the stern face of the nanny in charge, and then at Xiao Yinru, who was slowly getting up with the help of Shuqi and looked embarrassed, Xiao Zaihuan suddenly had an idea. She restrained the madness on her face and said with tears in her eyes, "Nanny, my big sister may have colluded with the person who framed me, so I couldn't control myself." After saying that, she burst into tears again. This time, she didn't scream crazily or rush over ferociously. She lowered her head and no one could see the red spots on her face, which made her look extremely pitiful. No matter whether her face was ruined or not, She couldn't be selected for the beauty contest. Thinking of the beautiful face she had seen before, the nanny in charge could only sigh helplessly. Originally, the third Miss Xiao's appearance could be regarded as superior, and she might have a chance, but now it was impossible. Whether it has something to do with your big sister or not, we'd better wait and see. Apply the medicine by yourself first. After that, get up and talk outside. The nanny in charge looked at her and said. After saying that, she turned around and went out. This was extremely rude, but the nanny in charge really didn't need to care too much about a beauty who couldn't be selected. Now she was still helping to ask about it for the sake of Duke Xing's mansion. Seeing the nanny in charge's contempt, Xiao Zaihuan was so angry that her face changed dramatically. She slapped the edge of the bed hard, and then turned her eyes to Xiao Yinru, who had just gotten up. She vented all her anger on Xiao Yinru, gnashed her teeth and said, "My good big sister, you are so kind. In order to promote yourself to the position of princess consort, you really do everything." Xiao Yinru had never been so aggrieved, but she also knew that she couldn't reason with Xiao Zaihuan at this time. She glanced at Xiao Wanru's face coldly and examined her for a while. She always felt that Xiao Wanru's previous words were not accidental. Did Xiao Wanru know something? If so, she needed to be more careful. Xiao Zaihuan's big reaction was unexpected. She had to find a way to spread the news. Chapter 750. Compared with Xiao Zaihuan, she cared more about Xiao Wanru. However, Xiao Wanru was lowering her head to apply medicine for Xiao Zaihuan with her watery eyes half closed, as if she didn't notice that Xiao Yinru was looking at her. "Third sister, I'll go outside first. Come out after you're done. You can't write 2 Xiao characters in one stroke. Since I'm your elder sister, I won't hurt you. I'll definitely help you catch the real murderer." Xiao Yinru said softly, as if she didn't take Xiao Zaihuan's offense to heart. "I'm going to change my clothes first." "Big sister, let me go with you." Xiao Wanru put down the medicine in her hand and said. Xiao Yinru's face darkened, and her eyes fell on Xiao Wanru's face silently and sharply. Xiao Wanru looked at her without avoiding her eyes. "Thank you, fifth sister. Someone needs to take care of third sister. You can stay here." After a long while, Xiao Yinru showed a smile on her face, which was as soft as ever. She had come to her senses at this time, so she wouldn't do anything rude again. "Big sister, let fifth sister accompany you. I'm worried about you going there alone. I was too angry and rude just now." Xiao Zaihuan gritted her teeth and said coldly. She also saw something wrong and didn't want Xiao Yinru to have time to do something against her or destroy any evidence. Xiao Yinru looked at Xiao Wanru and then at Xiao Zaihuan, who looked resentful. Knowing that she couldn't get away at this time, she frowned and said, "In this case, I'll have to trouble you, fifth sister." With that, she turned around and walked out. "Fifth sister, follow her," Xiao Zaihuan said. Xiao Wanru nodded, followed Xiao Yinru out of the inner room and went outside. Miss Yu and Miss D had already arrived in the outer room, and they stood aside with fear. Only Wang Yusin hadn't arrived yet. Xiao Wanru calmly glanced at the faces of the people in the room and followed Xiao Yinru out. Not far from the porch, there were palace maids cleaning the place. Xiao Wanru did not follow Xiao Yinru into the room, but stood outside the door in the corridor. Her eyes fell on the face of a palace maid who was cleaning the ground outside. Seeing that the maid looked around and found no one paying attention to her, she was about to turn back. However, when she turned her eyes, she suddenly met Xiao Wanru's eyes and couldn't help shivering. Xiao Wanru walked over slowly. The palace maid lowered her head and stood on the side of the road, not daring to move. Although the fifth Miss Xiao looked young, her momentum made the palace maids more and more afraid to move. "I heard that your name is Han Dan?" Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on Han Dan, the palace maid. This servant is." Han Dan bowed her head respectfully. Xiao Wanru looked at her silently. The feeling of being seen through made Han Dan's heart in her throat. It was not until a long time later that her burning gaze disappeared. But before she could breathe a sigh of relief, Xiao Wanru's words came into her ears, which almost made her fall to the ground. "If the grass on the wall of the palace becomes the grass on the wall, it will definitely be uprooted by the wind in the end." Xiao Wanru said slowly, turned around and walked back slowly. Han Dan stood where she was with cold hands and feet. She looked at the fifth Miss Xiao, who was gradually going away in horror, and her hand holding the broom trembled slightly. Before things became clear, she really wanted to please these two young ladies and benefit from both sides. Before these two young ladies became famous, this was actually a very good method. Many people in the palace would do the same. They would not expose all their cards and bet them all on a young lady who had not yet made a name for herself. In fact, besides Xiao Wanru and Xiao Yenru, she also liked another Mississippi. The first step was to send some news to these misses and keep a good relationship with them. But now Han Dan did not dare to do that. The maid of the fifth Miss Xiao had suppressed her before. Although she promised to testify, she was still hesitant. Now Xiao Wanru's words made her mind clear, so how could she not panic? The fifth Miss Xiao returned to the corridor and did not glance at her again, but she still felt that her gaze seemed to be there all the time. She did not dare to arouse her suspicion at this time and really arouse her disgust. Originally, at this time, she would go to the back of the room to see if the first Miss Xiao had sent out any news. When she was in the corridor just now, she saw the maid of the first Miss Xiao make a hint to her. She moved the broom in her hand a few times and began to sweep. She did not dare to look up at the corridor again. The fifth Miss Xiao was standing in the corridor, and she did not dare to look back. Xiao Wanru did not wait at the door for a long time. Xiao Yenru changed her clothes again and came out, and then the two of them went to the middle room together. As soon as they entered the room, they heard hurried footsteps behind them. Turning around, they saw Wang Yusin and a maid appear at the door with an extremely gloomy face. Wang Yusin's eyes suddenly fell on Xiao Wanru's intact face. Seeing that there was nothing unusual on her face, she secretly breathed a sigh of relief. When the nanny in charge sent someone to tell her, she did not make it clear, so she thought that there was something wrong with Xiao Wanru's face. Now that there was nothing wrong, she felt relaxed. She took a few steps forward and bowed to the nanny in charge. Seeing that everyone was here, the nanny in charge coughed in a low voice and looked sharply at Wang Yusin. "Miss Wang, tell me why you put incense in the censer yesterday?" She went straight to the point. She had asked the other two misses before and knew the reason for what happened last night. "Nanny, I didn't ask anyone to put incense in the censer. I don't know what happened to the incense, and it has nothing to do with me. It's just that the third Miss Xiao insisted that it was because of me yesterday, but I clearly don't know anything." Wang Yusin said innocently. "Miss Wang, this is the Imperial Palace. Not everyone can do whatever they want." The nanny in charge looked at Wang Yusin coldly and said coldly. Wang Yusin lowered her head uneasily and clasped her hands. She was a little flustered, gritted her teeth, and said, "Nanny, I know that this is the Imperial Palace, and I dare not do anything. Besides, I have no grudge against the third Miss Xiao, so why would I want to hurt her?" Only the testimony of Xiao Caihuan's maid could not prove anything. Could it be that what Xiao Caihuan's maid said was true? She could just insist that Xiao Caihuan said so in order to shirk the responsibility. Both of them were maids. Who was more noble than the other? The imperial physician sat below the nanny in charge and looked at the half-burned incense sheet in front of him with burning eyes. He did not pay attention to their conversation. The incense sheet in front of him inexplicably reminded him of something, but he couldn't remember it for a while, so he could only frown and continue to think. "Miss Wang, do you think that a maid can't prove anything?" Seeing that Wang Yusin was still so stubborn, the nanny in charge slammed her hand on the table and said, "In that case, don't blame me." With a wave of her hand, the servant girl behind Miss D took a step forward and knelt in front of the nanny in charge. "Nanny, I also saw Miss Wang's servant girl take action. At that time, I was standing at Miss Wang's side and couldn't see it. However, the servant girl happened to raise her head and look at the people around carefully. I felt surprised and paid more attention to her. I saw her take out a small paper bag from her bosom, put the things in the small paper bag into the incense burner, and then quickly closed it." "Nonsense." After being stunned for a moment, Wang Yusin glared at the maid and said. The maid hid to the side timidly and looked at her master, Miss D. "Miss D, why didn't your maid say it yesterday, but now?" Xiao Yenru raised her eyes and looked at Miss D with confusion in her eyes. The nanny in charge also looked a little suspicious and asked, "Miss D, what's going on?" This was what she had asked just now, but she didn't expect that someone had asked the same question last night, but Miss D's maid didn't say anything. Last night, it was so chaotic. If my maid said anything, it would make more trouble. Besides, the fifth miss was fine at that time. Miss D lowered her head and said in a low voice. As soon as she said this, and looking at Miss D's timid look, everyone immediately understood that Miss D seemed to be a person who didn't want to offend anyone, for fear of offending Wang Yusin. Moreover, Xiao Wanru was just uncomfortable at that time, and it was not a big deal. It was not worth it to offend other misses who entered the palace with her for no reason. Nanny, can you conclude that it was my maid who did it based on the words of two maids? Nanny, please uphold justice for me. Wang Yusin was still unconvinced. She glared at Miss D angrily, and then turned to the nanny in charge to complain loudly. Miss Yu, who was standing beside her, also seemed to want to speak, but seeing her fierce eyes, she didn't dare to say anything in the end. She just lowered her head and pinched the corner of her clothes. If possible, no one wanted to make enemies with others. If it wasn't Miss Wang, there must be someone else. When I entered the door, I smelled something wrong, but you were there. Now it's my third sister who had an accident, so there must be something wrong with other misses present. If it wasn't Miss Wang, could it be Miss D, Miss Yu, or my big sister? Xiao Wanru calmly glanced at several people present and analyzed. Among the people last night, Xiao Caihuan and Xiao Wanru were the least suspicious. The others seemed to be possible before the real culprit was found out. She had been paying attention to Miss Yu's reaction just now. If there was any master who could see it that day, it must be Miss Yu. Her position at that time should also be on the side of Wang Yusin, and Miss Yu seemed to be a meticulous person. However, it was too obvious that she wanted to protect herself. If this matter can't be found out, you can go out of the palace together. The palace will not allow such evil-minded beauties to stay. The nanny in charge understood and threatened with cold eyes. If they couldn't explain it clearly, they would be driven out of the palace together. As soon as she said this, Miss D and Miss Yu's faces turned pale, and their eyes became flustered. Even Xiao Yinru's face darkened. No one wanted to be driven out of the palace at this time, especially because of such a thing. Nanny. I also saw what Miss Wang's maid did last night. Miss Yu couldn't stand still and looked at the nanny in charge in panic. Chapter 751. Miss Yu, did you also see it? The nanny in charge asked again. Yes, I saw it too. Miss Yu said in panic. Xiao Wanru glanced at the two ladies. Both Miss D and Miss Yu seemed to be timid and only wanted to protect themselves. This kind of person would not be willing to offend others if it did not threaten their own interests. Therefore, both Miss Yu and Miss D chose to remain silent yesterday and did not want to offend Wang Yusin easily. In fact, with so many people present, there would inevitably be some flaws. With Wang Yusin's temperament, she could not be so thorough. Since you saw it, why didn't you say it? The nanny in charge scolded sternly. She had asked before, and Miss Yu did not dare to say a word. Now that she heard that she was going to be driven out of the palace, she had to tell the truth. Nanny, this is the palace. I dare not. Miss Yu panicked and burst into tears. She looked at the nanny in charge imploringly, indicating that she was in a helpless situation. Compared with Wang Yusin's status, this nanny in charge was much lower, so she did not dare to offend Wang Yusin. The nanny in charge glared at Miss Yu fiercely, only to see that Miss Yu's face was as pale as snow, and her body was on the verge of collapse. Obviously, she was frightened. Miss Wang, do you have anything to say now? Ignoring Miss Yu, who was frightened, the nanny in charge stared at Wang Yusin coldly and said, Nanny, how can you convict me based on their words? I didn't do it, so I didn't do it. Wang Yusin was also flustered, but she refused to admit it so easily. She gritted her teeth and said, there was no evidence for this kind of thing. She didn't believe that a supervisor nanny could really deal with her. She still had Prince Yu behind her. Prince Yu was quite affectionate to her. As long as she insisted, Prince Yu would definitely save her. What was a nanny in charge? She was just a servant in this palace. Thinking of this, Wang Yusen calmed down again and looked at the nanny in charge with a little arrogance. There were many nannies in charge in her mansion, and they usually looked very strict, but they were not good enough for her. Wang Yusen didn't believe that the nanny in charge could force her to admit it even if she didn't admit it. Wang Yusen thought that the supervisor nannies in the palace were the same as the supervisor nannies in charge of certain affairs in her mansion. Slap yourself. The nanny in charge's eyes fell coldly on Wang Yusen's face. Seeing the indignant and angry expression on her face, she suddenly smiled and said coldly, "Most of the people who died in the palace were such self-righteous women who really thought that they had some trump cards. If they really had, someone would have taken care of them, just like the first Miss Xiao and the fifth Miss Xiao of Duke Xing's mansion." The two of them looked very gentle, but this arrogant fellow thought that he was some great figure and actually dared to oppose him? A palace maid came over and took a step forward to hit her. "How dare you? My father is the assistant minister of the Ministry of Works." Wang Yusen didn't expect that the nanny in charge would really dare to hit her, so she took a step back and shouted. However, this sentence was not deterrent. The palace maid grabbed her collar mercilessly and then slapped her hard in the face, almost making Wang Yusen fall out. "You? How dare you hit me?" Wang Yusen used to be arrogant in the mansion, but now she was hit by a servant. After being stunned for a moment, she was furious and scratched the palace maid's face with her backhand. The palace maid quickly took a step back and avoided Wang Yusen's hand. After giving her a cold look, she retreated behind the nanny in charge and smiled mockingly at Wang Yusen. Like the nanny in charge, those who could survive in the palace were smart. Even if Wang Yusen was selected this time, she would not have a good life. "Miss Wang, are you dissatisfied?" The nanny in charge looked at Wang Yusen, who was almost threatening, and asked coldly, "How dare you? My father is the assistant minister of the Ministry of Works. He won't let you bully me like this." Wang Yusen's face was burning with pain, and she was so angry that she almost exploded. Feeling ashamed, she pointed at the nanny in charge and scolded loudly, "Who do you think you are? You are just a servant. How dare you treat me like this? My father will definitely make you pay with your life." Looking at Wang Yusen, who was almost crazy with anger and talking nonsense, Xiao Yanru no longer had any hope for her and looked away. Originally, she wanted to ask the palace maid who had shown kindness to her to send a message to Wang Yusen, tell her to be careful, and teach her a way to deal with it. Unexpectedly, the palace maid who had secretly sent the message to her didn't come. She had no choice but to come out of the room. She had thought that if Wang Yusen was smart, she would blame it on the servant girl and say that the servant girl was not one of her people. There were many such things in the palace, and it was very likely that someone else's lackey was planted by someone else. It was the same in the palace. It was more likely to happen in the assistant minister's mansion. She could just say that the maid was sent by someone in the assistant minister's mansion to deliberately harm her. However, Wang Yusen was so stupid that she even argued with the nanny in charge. How could the servants in charge of the palace compare with the nanny in charge? Basically, all the servants in charge of the palace had a high rank. Even if Assistant Minister Wang came, what could he do? Moreover, it was obviously Wang Yusen's fault. Although Xiao Wanru watched Wang Yusen's reaction, she had been paying attention to Xiao Yanru. Compared with Xiao Yanru, Wang Yusen was really not worth mentioning. She was just a pawn in the front. But now, this pawn had lost its effect. Of course, even if something happened to this pawn, Xiao Yanru would not be implicated. It would just make Xiao Yanru lose a person who could be used. When Xiao Yanru schemed against her, she understood it in this way. Now, with the change of Xiao Caihuan, it was not so easy for Xiao Yanru to get away unscathed. The third branch had always been suppressed by the second branch, and the miss of the third branch had always been suppressed by Xiao Yanru. Xiao Caihuan did not dare to do anything to Xiao Yanru, but in the current situation, Xiao Caihuan would not care about anything else. Put Miss Wang in custody. The nanny in charge didn't want to talk to such a stupid person, so she waved her hand and said, "How dare you? I'm the daughter of the assistant minister's mansion." Wang Yusen was furious. The nanny in charge didn't even bother to look at her. This time, two eunuchs came over, one holding Wang Yusen's hands on the left and the other on the right. The matter had basically been investigated, and the next thing was not something that the nanny in charge could handle. Someone would interrogate Wang Yusin separately. I remember. The imperial physician suddenly patted the table and laughed. He finally remembered what the incense tablets were. Did you find something? The nanny in charge was about to leave, but at this time, she turned to look at the imperial physician and asked with a frown. This incense tablet is not from the Central Plains. It's from the Sioux state. When the Sioux state came to pay tribute a few years ago, there was this kind of incense tablet. At that time, they specially showed it to the Imperial Institute of Medicine. The people of the Sioux state said that this kind of incense tablet could make people have red spots all over their body, which is easy to leave scars. The imperial physician said loudly, extremely excited because he had found this kind of thing. In the inner room, Xiao Caihuan had been listening to the noise outside. At this time, she was so shocked that she almost fainted. How could she not understand that she had been tricked? She held the corner of the quilt tightly and bit the corner of her lips. She would not let Wang Yusin or Xiao Yanru off. Xiao Yanru could not be innocent. Thinking that if her face was ruined, she would really be ruined. What else could she care about? No, shouldn't this be a thread of incense? Why is it an aromatherapy tablet? Could it be that someone has made incense into an aromatherapy tablet? Or is it that there is more than one type of incense? After the imperial physician finished speaking, he had a new doubt. His brows furrowed again as he muttered to himself. Imperial physician, may my third sister leave a scar? Xiao Wanru glanced at the imperial physician, who seemed to be lost in thought again, and asked. I'm afraid she has to. After being locked in here all night, the smell in the room hasn't dissipated, and there are a lot of red spots. It's difficult for her to recover. The imperial physician didn't want to be interrupted, so he waved his hand and said impatiently. At this time, he was thinking about the incense wholeheartedly. The reason why he remembered it so clearly was that at that time, the Sioux state had sent several imperial physicians to compete with the imperial physicians of the Imperial Institute of Medicine, and this kind of mixed poison was involved. At that time, all the imperial physicians of the Imperial Institute of Medicine were shocked by the mixed poison silently and then disfigured someone. Because of this, they thought that if someone used it to deal with the S in the palace would be in chaos. After that, the thread of incense left by the Sioux state was also sealed up. They didn't expect to see it again after so many years. The imperial physician wasn't there at that time and heard about it later, so he didn't recognize it for a while. He couldn't make the decision on this matter, so he had to report it to the chief physician of the Imperial Institute of Medicine and let him report it to the emperor. Thinking of this, he stood up. Imperial physician, can you ask my third sister why she has this kind of red spots? Why are they all fine? Is it because my third sister stayed in this room at night and the smell in the room lingered for a long time? Then why is her maid fine? Seeing that the imperial physician was about to leave, Xiao Wanru hurriedly said. There is something around her that triggered this kind of incense. It's a mixed poison. I didn't expect that there was this kind of mixed poison in Assistant Minister Wang's mansion. It's really powerful. The imperial physician shook his head. At this point, the matter was basically very clear. It was useless for him to stay. As for what kind of ointment should be used, there was one in the Imperial Institute of Medicine, but it might not be very effective. At that time, it was said that if there were too many red spots, it might leave a scar. But the imperial physician didn't know the details. It was the first time that he had seen this kind of red spots. The dense red spots on the face of the third Miss Xiao in the room made him feel frightened. The third Miss Xiao's face was probably ruined. He asked the little eunuch beside him to fetch the ointment, and the imperial physician left in a hurry. He still had to report this matter, which was not a trivial matter. How could the poison of the Sioux state, which had been locked up, fall into the body of a miss of the assistant minister's mansion? Nanny, I know who wants to hurt me. Nanny, please do me justice. At the door of the inner room, Xiao Caihuan, with a veil on her face, walked out with difficulty with the help of her maid's hand. She knelt down in front of Nanny Guanru with resentment in her eyes, which were exposed outside the veil. Chapter 752. Third sister, I'll get up first. Since Miss Wang did this, Assistant Minister's mansion will definitely give us an explanation. This kind of mixed poison is not something we can know, and Assistant Minister Wang can't get away with it. Seeing Xiao Zaihuan like this, Xiao Yinru immediately knew that it was not good. She hurriedly came over to help her and persuaded her in a low voice. She used both soft and hard methods, and even hinted that Xiao Zaihuan should not get into trouble. This was a poison from the Su state, and not everyone could get it. Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart and looked at her indifferently. She saw the anxiety in her eyes, but so what? In the past, Xiao Zaihuan would not dare to do anything when she heard her words, but now Xiao Yinru could not scare the half-crazy Xiao Zaihuan. Whether it would cause trouble or bring trouble to Duke Xing's mansion was not as important as Xiao Zaihuan's hatred for Xiao Yinru at this time. She couldn't wait for Xiao Yinru to die now. Xiao Zaihuan had heard clearly what the Imperial physician said just now. Her appearance was ruined, and her life was ruined. How could she let Xiao Yinru live a good life? Nanny, it's this protective talisman. Someone must have poisoned this protective talisman. Xiao Zaihuan pushed Xiao Yinru away and handed over the protective talisman tightly held in her hand. Seeing this protective talisman and then looking at Xiao Zaihuan, who had a crazy aura, Xiao Wanru slowly lowered her head and exhaled heavily. Sure enough, Xiao Zaihuan knew that there was something wrong with this protective talisman, so she did not dare to wear it. She only put it under her pillow, thinking that it would be fine in this way, so she did not wear it close to her skin. However, she gave him one of these safety talismans and even said that wearing it would protect him. The protective talisman was usually worn around the neck and close to the skin. However, this protective talisman was more poisonous. Within a certain range of this protective talisman, one would be poisoned. The protective talisman under the pillow was as effective as the one under the pillow. This is it. The nanny in charge did not dare to take this thing directly, so she looked at it and asked, "Yes, this is it. It must be caused by this. I had other things before I entered the palace, but this was the only one I got in the palace. At that time, many people handled it." Xiao Zaihuan said hatefully, "Leave it here. I will investigate this matter thoroughly." The nanny in charge pointed at the corner of the table and signaled her to put it down. She didn't dare to hold it casually, for fear that she would be poisoned. It was better to let someone from the Imperial Academy of Medicine take it away. Who knew what evil things there were in that small country in the wilderness? "Nanny, this matter must have something to do with my big sister." Xiao Zaihuan put the protective talisman on the table, pointed at Xiao Yinru and said with red eyes, "Third sister, what are you talking about? I don't know anything about your protective talisman. How can you say that I have something to do with it?" Xiao Yinru was so shocked that her face turned pale. "Do you really not know anything about me? That day, when I asked the palace servant to find the amulet, you clearly heard it. Didn't you happen to come over? You even took a few glances at the palace servant." Xiao Zaihuan gritted her teeth. "I just took a few more glances. What's so strange about that? Third sister's words are unfair. Can't I take a few more glances? Third sister, we are all members of Duke Xing's mansion. The second branch and the third branch of Duke Xing's mansion have always helped each other. Why do you have to push this matter to me now?" Xiao Yinru's eyes turned red, and tears fell down. She looked at Xiao Zaihuan sadly and said, "Third sister, are you dragging me into this?" Hearing her reproach and looking at Xiao Zaihuan's ferocious face, everyone felt that Xiao Yinru looked more credible. Xiao Zaihuan was crazy. She went around biting people, regardless of whether they were her sisters or not. The nanny in charge frowned. She didn't like Xiao Zaihuan to accuse others without any evidence. She believed that Xiao Yinru was the one who hurt others just because Xiao Yinru took a few more glances at her. This reason was unreasonable and ridiculous. Could it be that the third Miss Xiao couldn't bear the blow and went crazy because of this matter? The nanny in charge didn't want to involve the first Miss of Xiao's mansion at all. She was a person who was taken care of by the superior. "Third Miss, is it strange to look at a palace maid?" The nanny in charge asked indifferently. If she were not the legitimate Miss of Duke Xing's mansion, she would have left at this time. "It's not strange to look at a palace maid. What's strange is that she also looked for this palace maid and said that she wanted to buy a protective talisman. Xiao Zaihuan pointed at Xiao Yanru and said loudly, "Why did I look for this palace maid and she also looked for this palace maid? She must have done something." Third Miss Xiao, since you can find someone to buy a protective talisman, why can't the first Miss Xiao do it? The nanny in charge was unhappy. Why did something happen to my protective talisman when she also looked for it? It must be her, it must be her. Xiao Zaihuan couldn't give any evidence. She just felt that it was Xiao Yanru. Looking at Xiao Yanru, she was so angry that she wanted to scream. Her life had been ruined, so she wouldn't let Xiao Yanru have an easy time. Well, third Miss Xiao, if you want to go crazy, go back to your mansion and vent it. Do you think that the first Miss Xiao will be jealous of your participation in the beauty contest, so she wants to hurt your face? The nanny in charge raised the corners of her mouth mockingly. This third Miss Xiao was good, but she was still a little worse than the first Miss Xiao. It's not me, it's fifth sister. Big sister wants to hurt you and ruin your face. After choking for a while, Xiao Zaihuan turned her eyes to Xiao Wanru crazily, pointed at Xiao Wanru and said loudly, "She wants to hurt me?" Xiao Wanru saw that they were talking about her, looked up at Xiao Yanru, and then at Xiao Zaihuan, and pointed at herself in confusion. "Yes, she wants to hurt you. Fifth sister, big sister has always disliked you. She is afraid that you will take her place in the beauty contest, so she just doesn't want you to be left behind. If it were someone else, she wouldn't be afraid, but you are different. You are the legitimate daughter of the first branch and the daughter of the first uncle. The second branch has always been afraid of you and will never let you have an easy time." Xiao Zaihuan was almost crazy at this time. She said whatever was on her mind. There was only one crazy idea in her mind. She must drag Xiao Yanru down and make Xiao Yanru suffer. She would never let Xiao Yanru have an easy time. Slap. A heavy slap landed on Xiao Zaihuan's face, and Xiao Zaihuan's head tilted to one side. Xiao Yanru knelt down beside Xiao Zaihuan with a plop, holding Xiao Zaihuan's hand tightly with both hands, and tears fell down. "Third sister, wake up. We are sisters in the same mansion. No matter you or fifth sister, if anything happens to either of us, Grandma will feel bad. Grandma values rules the most. How can she let us sisters do this? You are making Grandma sad. You are like digging out Grandma's heart. Third sister, you were hurt today. I know it's my fault. I didn't take good care of you. If you are angry, it doesn't matter if you hit me a few more times. When I go back, I will definitely ask Grandma to find a way to cure you. The Imperial physician also said that you may only leave a scar. With the strength of our entire Duke Xing's mansion, it may not be useless to find a good doctor. But if something happens to our Duke Xing's mansion because of us sisters, how can we have time to find a good doctor for you?" Xiao Yanru cried bitterly. She let go of Xiao Zaihuan's hand, hugged Xiao Zaihuan, and held her in her arms. "Third sister, we are a family. We are bound together for good or ill. The mixed poison of the Su state is not something that ordinary people can get. If we find out who got this mixed poison, their property will be confiscated and their whole family will be exterminated. If their property was confiscated and their whole family exterminated, no one would be able to survive." Xiao Zaihuan shuddered. Her originally frantic eyes were comforted by Xiao Yanru's words. Hearing the meaning of Xiao Yanru's words, she trembled suddenly and her eyes became panicked. She had acted in a spurt of anger before, but now she panicked because of Xiao Yanru's words. If something happened to Duke Xing's mansion, her face would really be ruined. No one would treat her again and she might even lose her life. There was not only the second branch of Duke Xing's mansion, but also the third branch. Before they separated, the third branch was one. Xiao Wanru calmly watched Xiao Yanru intimidate Xiao Zaihuan and raised the corners of her mouth silently. She was now also a member of Duke Xing's mansion. From this point of view, of course, she would not let Duke Xing's mansion get involved in this matter, nor did she ask to push Xiao Yanru out for such a thing. With Xiao Yanru's temperament, how could she fall into the trap so easily? There was no direct evidence to prove that it was her, but because of Xiao Zaihuan's crazy behavior just now, people had already suspected her. This was enough. 1,000-mile ant's nest was destroyed in an instant. Xiao Yanru had an excellent reputation outside, but now her reputation was really damaged. She had attracted the attention of others before she was officially selected, so Xiao Yanru would become a target for many people. There was always someone better than her. Xiao Wanru glanced at the nanny in charge's face and saw her looking at Xiao Yanru thoughtfully. There was no change in her expression, but her eyes were very deep. Everyone in the palace was shrewd. Xiao Yanru's words sounded like she was persuading Xiao Caihuan, but in fact, there was another meaning in her words. The first Miss Xiao was not as dignified and gentle as the rumors said. She was obviously a scheming person. Thinking of Xiao Caihuan's words before, she turned to Xiao Wanru, who was standing aside. Xiao Wanru, who was standing quietly on the side, frowned slightly. It seemed that she was at a loss in the current situation, so she did not go up to persuade Xiao Yanru immediately. Her long eyelashes fluttered a few times, showing a smart and beautiful coldness, and the raised corners of her eyes and red corners of her mouth made people feel charming. There were many beauties in the world. Some were arrogant, some were charming, and some were as beautiful as orchids in autumn. Only the fifth Miss Xiao was completely different from others. There was a hint of coldness in her charm, which made people unconsciously think of the aloof fairies in the Moon Palace. But when she smiled slightly, it was like hundreds of flowers blooming, diluting that coldness and charm. Such a face could be said to be stunning, or not only stunning, but also beautiful. It was understandable that the first Miss Xiao, who was known as the First Beauty, wanted to deal with the fifth Miss Xiao. Moreover, the first Miss Xiao was not as kind as the rumors said outside. Chapter 753. Xiao Caihuan was sent out of the Imperial Palace after lunch. Xiao Wanru and Xiao Yanru followed her all the way to the gate of the Imperial Palace and watched her leave slowly with the help of 2 palace maids, followed by an imperial physician. In such a situation, she naturally couldn't participate in the talent show anymore. Not to mention the talent show, it was not easy to cure her face. Fifth sister, let's go back. Seeing Xiao Caihuan's figure disappear behind the palace gate, Xiao Yanru turned around and said to Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on Xiao Yanru's face. Xiao Yanru looked a little tired, and it was difficult to hide a trace of haggardness in her eyes. She slightly raised the corner of her mouth and was about to speak when they suddenly heard crying behind them. They looked back together and saw 3 people coming from the opposite side. The first one was Wang Yusen, but the arrogant and rude miss of the assistant minister, at this time, covered her face and cried as she walked. The people following behind her were not her maids, but 2 eunuchs. One look and anyone could tell that they were very impatient. Xiao Wanru's eyes darkened. This morning, the Imperial Palace sent a chief eunuch and a chief palace maid over to deal with their affairs. She was called over once, and Xiao Yanru was called over several times. At the moment, Xiao Yanru looked haggard, half of which was pretending, and the other half was real. Although Xiao Yanru was not involved in this matter, because of Xiao Caihuan's previous crazy actions and the testimony of the palace maid, even if Xiao Duanru could not be accused of plotting against her, she must have done something. However, no one could find anything on her for the time being, so no one thought that she was innocent. When the chief eunuch and the chief palace maid left, they were extremely cold to Xiao Yanru, which was completely different from when they had just come. Xiao Yanru should have panicked, so they could see the haggard look on her face. Otherwise, with Xiao Yanru's temperament, even if she was really tired, she would not let others see it at a glance. In the end, it fell on Wang Yusen. Her maid was directly detained and probably tortured. She was the daughter of the vice minister's mansion, so they couldn't do anything to her before things were completely clear, so they drove her out of the palace first. Since she had used the word drive, of course, she couldn't say it in a good tone. The 2 eunuchs obviously didn't treat her well. Seeing that she walked slowly, one of them even pushed her. Wang Yusen was pushed so hard that she almost fell. After 2 steps, she stood still and saw Xiao Yanru and her sister standing in front of her. She turned her eyes from Xiao Yanru's face to Xiao Wanru's with hatred on her face, but she did not dare to be as presumptuous as before. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on Wang Yusen calmly. Now the matter had basically been investigated. Wang Yusin accidentally picked up such a piece of incense. It turned out that she had heard that Xiao Wanru had been drugged. If she smoked with this incense, there would inevitably be red blisters on her face, and then she would not be able to participate in the consort selection. Therefore, Wang Yusin secretly took this piece of incense to deal with Xiao Wanru, which led to a series of things later. Originally, she was going to Xiao Wanru's room, but she expected that Xiao Wanru had not come back yet, so she went to Xiao Caihuan's room, put incense in Xiao Caihuan's incense burner, and then asked Xiao Caihuan to invite Xiao Wanru. Unexpectedly, it was Xiao Caihuan who was drugged in the end instead of Xiao Wanru. As for Xiao Caihuan's protective talisman, she asked a palace maid to help her buy it at a high price. It was not so easy to find protective talismans in the palace, especially those that had been consecrated. In order to get a high price, the palace maid actually took out protective talismans that had not been consecrated. Even the nuns in the hall said that they did not know about it. They would make some protective talismans, which were recorded in the records of those that had been consecrated. As for those that had not been consecrated, they would sometimes be given one when the chief palace maids came to ask for it. Because it was not for noble lords, it was just an ordinary kind, so no one would care who it was given to. Therefore, the protective talisman that Xiao Caihuan got was not found. There were two aspects that implicated Xiao Yenru. One was what Xiao Caihuan said and the palace maid's testimony. Xiao Yenru did send someone to contact her and asked her about the protective talisman. She also asked her to buy one, and it was sent to Xiao Yenru first, and then to Xiao Caihuan. The other was the testimony of a palace maid. She said that she saw Xiao Yenru and her maid talking about something after the palace maid left. For fear that others would hear it, the maid deliberately stood at the door, looked around, and then closed the door. The palace maid saw their sneaky behavior through the window. But she didn't know what they were talking about. She only remembered that the maid pointed in the direction of 5th Miss Xiao at that time, and then there was nothing else. Because of the evidence of these two people and some unclear reasons, the chief eunuchs and the chief palace maid sent here all thought that Xiao Yenru was not innocent. Although the palace maid who gave Xiao Yenru the protective talisman swore that she took 3 protective talismans at the same time, it was impossible for 2 of them to be in trouble while the other one was fine. The final result of the investigation was that the protective talisman in Xiao Yenru's hand was fine. Xiao Caihuan and the one Xiao Caihuan gave Xiao Wanru were mixed with something else. Xiao Wanru also made it clear that she didn't like the protective talisman. If she didn't accept it, she was afraid that Xiao Caihuan would be unhappy, so she accepted it and put it by the window. The maid accidentally thought that she didn't want it, so she threw it out of the window. In the end, the protective talisman was found outside the window. It could be said that it was a freak accident that Xiao Wanru avoided this disaster. If Xiao Wanru also wore it, even if it was not as serious as Xiao Caihuan's, she would inevitably have red spots and be sent out of the palace. Miss Wang. Seeing Wang Yusin standing in front of them and not leaving, Xiao Wanru raised her eyes lightly, looked at her, and said, "Miss Wang, I have no grudge against you in the past or today, but why do you want to harm me like this? Don't tell me that Miss Wang will benefit from my face?" Since they met, Xiao Wanru happened to have something to ask. Wang Yusin's hatred for her was so great that it seemed that she was determined to destroy her. There was no relationship between them. Even if there was some unhappiness, it was only once, and they had never met each other for the rest of the time. Do you need others to tell you what you have said and done? Xiao Wanru, don't be too proud. God is watching you. Wang Yusin gnashed her teeth and said, looking at Xiao Wanru with resentment. Her words were inexplicable, as if she wanted to harm Xiao Wanru, and Xiao Wanru deserved it. Yujia was so angry that she was about to step forward, but Xiao Wanru stopped her with a look. Miss Wang, do you really think it's okay? Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and glanced at the high palace wall on the side. In their section, there were high palace walls on both sides, and people standing inside were almost small. The thick palace walls gave people a deep depression, especially for people like Wang Yusin, who had been driven out of the palace. Wang Yusin's face changed dramatically, and she clenched her trembling fingers. Third sister was poisoned by the Sioux state, and I heard that it was an offering at that time. This kind of thing is not something that Miss Wang can get. Miss Wang, I'm afraid that even Vice Minister Wang can't absolve himself from the guilt. Xiao Wanru withdrew her gaze and looked at Wang Yusin extremely calmly with some pity in her eyes. Miss Wang, do you really not know that you have been used by others? After that, she stopped looking at her and walked past Wang Yusin with a contemptuous look. After Xiao Wanru walked over, it was Xiao Yenru who faced Wang Yusin. Miss Wang, don't worry. How can this kind of thing involve your father? Fifth sister is just trying to scare you. Xiao Yenru comforted her softly. Compared with Xiao Wanru's attitude, Xiao Yenru's attitude was almost gentle, with some pity for Wang Yusin, which made people have a good impression on her. In this way, the first Miss Xiao was indeed the kindest. The two little eunuchs didn't know what had happened before, and they thought that the first Miss Xiao seemed to have a good character. Being comforted, Wang Yusin's lips trembled twice. It seemed that she wanted to say something, but she didn't know what to say at the moment, and tears fell down again. Big sister, do you think that Miss Wang is wronged? I remember that the Imperial Palace has just concluded that third sister's face has been ruined, and so has her life. But I didn't expect that big sister still thinks that Miss Wang is wronged. In that case, third sister is really at a disadvantage. You've only been in the Imperial Palace for a few days, but your friendship with Miss Wang has surpassed the sisterhood of many years. Xiao Wanru turned around behind them, and her cold eyes fell on Xiao Yenru through Wang Yusin. Their eyes met through Wang Yusin. The smile on Xiao Yenru's face froze. Wang Yusin had just framed Xiao Caihuan, and it was verified. She didn't help her sister, but showed kindness to Wang Yusin, which sounded like she was trying to cover up. Xiao Wanru clenched the handkerchief in her hand and became more and more cunning. Although they were at the gate of the Imperial Palace, and it seemed that no one paid attention to them, the two little eunuchs beside them would pass the message. Xiao Yenru was sure that what she said here today would definitely be spread out. She had just wanted to comfort Wang Yusin, but at this time, she couldn't go on. Xiao Wanru, what do you mean? Wang Yusin turned her head angrily, and her eyes almost spurted fire. I just want to make it clear that our Duke Xing's mansion is no longer friendly with your Wang's mansion. But if Miss Wang and Big Sister have a good relationship, then I have nothing to say. After all, I don't represent the whole Duke Xing's mansion, but only myself. No matter if you want to frame me or third sister and I will no longer be friendly with you. Vicious people will eventually suffer from their own actions. But I don't know who will benefit the most in the end. Xiao Wanru's words were extremely cold and merciless. After that, she turned to look at Xiao Yenru with a faint, almost traceless smile on her lips, which looked a little gloomy and evil in the two high walls. Big sister, if you really have such a good relationship with Miss Wang, you can see Miss Wang off. I'll go back first. By the way, please ask who flattered Miss Wang and thought that I wanted to hurt her. Miss Wang is like, do I have to care about her and hurt her? Chapter 754. After saying that, Xiao Wanru looked Wang Yusin up and down contemptuously, and then walked to the palace in an extremely arrogant manner. Fifth sister, wait for me. Of course, Xiao Yenru couldn't stay at this time. Xiao Caihuan had been in such a big trouble, and it was all because of Wang Yusin. Wang Yusin's face turned blue with anger at first, and then turned red with anger. When Xiao Yenru passed by her, a thought suddenly flashed through her mind, and she looked at Xiao Yenru's back in horror. Originally, she didn't think that Xiao Yenru had anything to do with it, but Xiao Wanru's words just now enlightened her. Those words that Xiao Wanru said about her in private were indeed heard from others, but the one who said it was a good friend of hers, so she didn't suspect her at first. However, Xiao Wanru's words just now woke her up like the evening drum and morning bell. She felt weak and leaned against the palace wall on the side, feeling dizzy and cold. Among the palace maids in the draft, Xiao Wanru and Xiao Yenru were the most outstanding, not only because of their appearance, but also because of their family backgrounds. If there were any rivals, the Xiao sisters were the real rivals. If something happened to Xiao Wanru, the one who benefited the most would naturally be Xiao Yenru. Coincidentally, every time Xiao Yenru mentioned that the fifth Miss Xiao had slandered her behind her back, the first Miss Xiao was present, and she had always been very protective of her fifth sister. It seemed that they had a good relationship, But just now, she clearly felt that the relationship between the Xiao sisters was not good at all. Thinking of some rumors outside and what she saw in front of her, Wang Yusin blacked out. She finally realized that she seemed to have been used by someone. Every time Xiao Yenru helped Xiao Wanru explain, she would get angrier and more upset. If the relationship between the Xiao sisters wasn't so good, and the first Miss Xiao wasn't so generous, she wouldn't have seen it. Could it really be the first Miss Xiao? Wang Yusin reached out to grab Xiao Yenru and asked her to make it clear, but she found that she couldn't say a word. She had no evidence to prove that the first Miss Xiao had intervened in this matter. Her fingers were trembling, and her whole body was trembling. Wang Yusin finally knew fear. If this was really Xiao Yenru's scheme, she must have done it when she first saw her. She didn't expect that she had fallen into such a trap so early. At this time, she couldn't explain it even if she wanted to. No wonder when the first Miss Xiao invited her over to talk, she was not in her room but in Xiao Zaihuan's room. No wonder she always heard her good sister say that Xiao Wanru cursed her viciously in private, even though she had no grudge against Xiao Wanru. Who would be in a good mood? If there was such an opportunity, he would definitely not let it go. First Miss Xiao. Her voice almost overflowed from her throat. Wang Yusin thought it was loud, but in fact it was very light. Seeing the Xiao sisters disappear in front of her, Wang Yusin fell to the ground with a pale face. Xiao Wanru's words hit her ears hard. She didn't care about it before, but now she cared about it very much. The meaning in her words was very clear. There was only one meaning. Her matter was not over. Not only her, but also her father would be implicated. Because of the thing from the Su Kingdom, Xiao Zaihuan was poisoned by the Su Kingdom, and not everyone could get access to the offering. A little eunuch stepped forward, looked at her condescendingly, and said sarcastically, "Miss Wang, don't you want to go?" If it had been a few days ago, he wouldn't have dared to say it. But now Wang Yusin was useless, so he could say whatever he wanted. She didn't seem to be a smart person. How dare she talk to the two misses of Duke Xing's mansion like this? Didn't she know that they were likely to be selected in the future? But on second thought, if she was smart, such a thing wouldn't have happened. Now she was just sent back to the Imperial Palace, and it was uncertain what would happen after she went back. But one thing was certain. She was ruined, and even her father, an assistant minister, couldn't save her. The people in the Imperial Palace had always been the best at currying favor with those in power. At this time, they just hit her when she was down. The other eunuch saw that she had fallen to the ground and her eyes were unfocused. He walked over and pulled her up. He said impatiently, "It's useless even if you pretend to be crazy now. Hurry up and leave so that we can finish our task earlier. It's really unlucky for you to be like this." After pulling her up, he pushed her forward hard. This time, Wang Yusin didn't stand firm and fell heavily to the ground again. Her knees hit the big blue stone under her feet, making a heavy sound. The sharp pain woke her up. She slowly stood up with her hands on the ground and looked at the Imperial Palace with dying eyes. Then she turned around with difficulty, staggered, gritted her teeth, and walked away. She couldn't let it go like this. She wanted to go back and tell her father that this was an internal matter of Duke Xing's mansion and had nothing to do with her. She was also set up. This matter stirred up a lot of waves in the palace. For a while, Chushio Palace sent more palace servants over and paid more attention to the affairs of the beauties. The originally relaxed environment immediately became tense because of this matter. The beauties looked at their companions around them and felt worried. They vaguely felt that some of their companions might set them up. For a moment, the entire Chushio Palace was in a state of panic. Even if they had a good relationship with each other in the past, it was better not to walk together at this time in order to avoid arousing suspicion. Only sisters from the same mansion occasionally walked together or had a good relationship with each other. What happened outside the Imperial Palace couldn't be spread to Chushio Palace for the time being. Xiao Wanru didn't know what would happen to Wang Yusin after she went back. But as long as Wang Yusin wasn't really stupid, she should understand that she had been set up by someone and became a sharp weapon in someone else's hands. As for who the person who used her was, it depended on who would benefit the most if something happened to her. Although Xiao Yenru didn't directly take action, she definitely played a role in it. As long as Wang Yusin could guess Xiao Yinru's identity, she could find other traces of Xiao Yinru's activities and would inevitably find some evidence in her favor. Of course, she couldn't predict whether these plausible evidence could save her. She just had to see how the assistant minister's mansion would deal with it. In any case, this matter had nothing to do with her now. It was Xiao Yinru who was concerned. Xiao Yinru seemed to win this round. There was no evidence pointing directly at her, but in fact, it made more people doubt her intentions. A beauty with outstanding appearance, a noble family background, and an extremely scheming beauty would be a taboo to everyone, especially those who participated in the beauty contest with her. No one knew when they would be set up. No one knew where the rumor came from. Originally, this matter had been tightly sealed. It was only known that Miss Wang of the assistant minister's mansion had set up the third miss of Duke Xing's mansion, but no one knew the details. However, some beauties eavesdropped on the private conversation of the palace maids and talked about the tortuous cause of this matter. Many people in the Imperial Palace were smart. They knew that the third Miss Xiao had been set up by mistake. When they were supposed to deal with the fifth Miss Xiao, many people guessed that it was the first Miss Xiao. Seeing that the reputation of the first beauty was about to be taken away by her cousin, everyone could imagine what the first Miss Xiao would do out of unwillingness. But after all, it was a little too vicious. There used to be some rumors about Duke Xing's mansion, Madame of Duke Xing, and Xiao Yenru in the capital city. Everyone thought it was unlikely before. After all, the first Miss Xiao's image was so good that some hearsay couldn't be accurate. But now everyone thought it was very possible. When some things were connected and they saw it with their own eyes, it was easy to correct their original thoughts. This was the situation now for the beauties. They stayed away from ghosts and gods, and they never wanted to follow in the footsteps of the third Miss Xiao, who was the first Miss Xiao's cousin. They were sisters from the same mansion and they had been friends for so many years. Even they could do it, let alone others. Some of the beauties who had been on good terms with Xiao Yinru had to measure their friendship with Xiao Yinru at this time. Could it compare with the sisterhood between Xiao Yinru and Xiao Caihuan? They had long heard that Xiao Yinru, the eldest daughter of lineal descent, took great care of other sisters-in-law in the mansion. Was this how she took care of them? The beauties were suspicious and avoided the two sisters of Duke Xing's mansion one by one. None of them was willing to be with them. One might be harmed, which was not a good thing, while the other took the initiative to harm others. They might be used at any time. Xiao Yenru found a strange phenomenon that there were fewer and fewer people around her. There were many young ladies who were willing to talk to her, but now there was no one around her. Wherever she went, others looked at her with vigilance. Sometimes, when she walked past the beauties who were talking, the others just left. At first, she thought it was a coincidence. After several times, Xiao Yenru found that these things were not a coincidence. After asking Shuqi to inquire about it, she was so angry that her fingers trembled. But she didn't know where the rumor came from, nor did she know which palace maid said it. Even if she went to explain it, she couldn't explain it clearly. Xiao Yenru had to suffer it in silence. After calming down for a while, she also cast her eyes on Xiao Wanru. She felt that she and Xiao Wanru were born to be enemies. If Xiao Wanru existed, there would be no Xiao Wanru. This matter must have something to do with Xiao Wanru. Maybe it was because of what she said to Wang Yusin at the gate of the palace that day. At that time, she had wanted to explain to Wang Yusin and comfort her. But with Xiao Wanru's words, what else could she say? She could only follow Xiao Wanru back. Now thinking of it, it should be Xiao Wanru who did it on purpose. Thinking of this hatred, she put the teacup in her hand heavily on the table. Xiao Wanru, she would never let this bitch off. She took a deep breath to calm down the anger in her heart. Then she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened her eyes again, her eyes had calmed down. She couldn't sit still and wait for death. She couldn't be isolated and suspected by everyone, and then let other nobles in the palace suspect her so as to affect her consort selection. She had to save herself. Chapter 755. Xiao Wanru lived a peaceful life in the past few days. She didn't know many people, so it didn't matter if those misses didn't get close to her. Moreover, she was the victim, not the culprit. Those misses still looked at her kindly. Although they thought that she was too beautiful and a strong opponent, compared with Xiao Yanru, Xiao Wanru was much less dangerous. Xiao Wanru became more and more familiar with this female painter, and even the female painter asked her to come over and talk to her when she was free. The female painter's surname was Chu, Madame Chu. She was the madam of an official's family. Her rank was not high, and her husband died without a son, so she was recommended to the Imperial Palace to paint for the beauties. When Madame Chu was young, she was a famous talented woman in the capital city, but her family background was a little shallow, so she only married a low-ranking official. Her husband died without a son. This situation was very similar to Xiao Wanru's imagination in her last life. It inexplicably reminded her of the time when she entered the Imperial Palace to paint for the beauties after Wen Shiqi's death. The difference was that she had a bad reputation in the capital city. Someone must have ordered her to enter the Imperial Palace to paint. Although she still couldn't remember Chu Luchen, she could always feel that Chu Luchen seemed to be everywhere after she entered the Imperial Palace. Therefore, she could hardly remember what happened after she entered the Imperial Palace, or she could only remember bits and pieces. Only when Chu Luchen wasn't in the picture could she see and remember clearly. Xiao Wanru didn't know the reason. Since she had been reborn, she didn't understand why she had dug out the memory about Chu Luchen from her memory. But it didn't prevent her from understanding that she should enter the Imperial Palace to help Chu Luchen, and Qi Baiyu didn't have such great power. Madame Chu in front of her proved her idea very well. There were many female painters in the Imperial Palace, and each of them was talented. Madame Chu could enter the Imperial Palace after passing several tests. At that time, it seemed that she immediately entered the Imperial Palace as soon as Qi Baiyu went to tell her about it without any difficulty. In her previous life, she was so muddle-headed that she could hardly think or see anything. Therefore, she did not think about the weirdness in this life. Now she thought about it, it was really a joke. How could she think that Qi Baiyu was capable enough to take care of her in the palace? In this life and the previous life, Chu Luchen had been by her side all the time, but she didn't see him. Thinking of this, Xiao Wanru was full of guilt. There was such a person who had been by her side to help her, but she had dug out the memory about him deeply. If he knew, he would be heartbroken. At this time, she suddenly felt lucky that she was the one who had been reborn, not Chu Luchen. The beauties were not close to her, they were all afraid that she would be harmed again. If they got too close to her, they might be caught in the crossfire. She was free, so that day she went to Madame O's place again. Sometimes, Madame O didn't paint a portrait and would only retouch the image that she had painted before. It would take a lot of time to slowly retouch it. Madame O's painting is really good. Xiao Wanru turned behind Madame O, looked at the painting that she was revising, and said with a smile. She really appreciated Madame O's painting skills. In her previous life, she had painted many beauties. Now seeing Madame O's painting, she couldn't help but want to say something. It's not very good. I always feel that something is missing. Madame O put down the painting in her hand, took a step back, looked at her painting and then looked at Xiao Wanru. She always felt that something was missing in her painting. The fifth Miss Xiao in front of her was obviously better than her painting. She was revising Xiao Wanru's painting now. In fact, she had already painted one before, but Madame O was not satisfied with it, so she drew another one. But she was still not satisfied with this one. It's very good. Madame O is going to paint me as if I'm the best in the world. Xiao Wanru said with a smile and a leisurely look. She liked the peaceful feeling in the studio and would come to see Madame O from time to time. The fifth miss has always been outstanding. In fact, it has little to do with me. It's just that I can't paint the fifth miss's charm. Madame O shook her head helplessly and felt that her painting skills were not good enough. Otherwise, how could she fail to paint the person in front of her? She said while looking at the painting, I heard that the third young master of the left prime minister is excellent in painting. If I can get his painting, I will definitely be able to paint the fifth Mrs. Real charm. Madame O said with great pity. Of course, she didn't really want Wen Shiqi to paint for Xiao Wanru. She just said that. Xiao Wanru's hand holding the painting album paused for a moment, and then she slowly put down the painting album in her hand. When she met Wen Shiqi in her previous life, the famous elegant child in the capital city had been tortured by illness and mainly recuperated in bed. Even so, he still gave her some advice. However, she made real progress in the Imperial Palace. It should be Chu Luchin who taught her, but she didn't know whether he taught her in person or sent her a painting. She reached out her hand and rubbed between her eyebrows, feeling too uncomfortable as if there was something pressing in her mind. She knew it should be like this, but she couldn't see it. "Fifth miss, are you tired?" Seeing Xiao Wanru rubbing her eyebrows, Madame O asked with concern. "I'm fine. I just have a headache." Xiao Wanru covered it up and said, "Fifth miss, go inside and have a rest." Madame O said with concern. She had no children, but she got along well with Xiao Wanru these days. She had long regarded Xiao Wanru as her nephew. "Thank you, Madame O." Xiao Wanru nodded, picked up the painting album she put down casually, turned around, and walked behind the screen. This studio was divided into two parts. The front room was for painting, and the back room was for resting. There was a large rattan chair near the back window with two thick cushions on it. After Xiao Wanru came over and sat down, she leaned against it. Yujia put the cushions behind her so that she could lean against the rattan chair. The rattan chair was very spacious. Xiao Wanru was petite, so she nestled in the rattan chair. With the sunlight coming in from the window, she looked extremely comfortable. Yujia served a cup of tea on the table in front of her and then left, leaving Xiao Wanru to rest alone in the room. After flipping through a few pages, her eyelids became heavier and heavier, and she finally fell into a deep sleep. Xiao Wanru had been dreaming, and the boundless dream seemed to have been in the thick darkness. She had been despised by everyone in Jiangzhou before she entered the capital city. Qi Tianyu had pulled off the red veil when the bridal sedan chair had arrived. All the disasters had started at that time. From that time on, she became a shameless girl who snatched her elder sister's marriage by force. Then there were rumors about her relationship with Qi Baiyu, which further branded her as a bitch. Then, on her way to the capital city, she was schemed against one marriage after another, and the engagement was broken off again and again. Finally, she entered the deputy prime minister's mansion in the name of Chong Shi, and then she ended up being driven out of the mansion. She was trampled into the mud again and again, and in the end, her life was full of blood. She had been schemed against all her life and then fell into a dead end. Her heart ached so much that she couldn't breathe, as if something was suppressing her. She wanted to say something to scare the nightmare away, but she couldn't say a word. Zhuozhua tojua. Suddenly, someone called her. The bloody dream slowly faded, and then there was thick darkness. There seemed to be a figure in the darkness, but she couldn't see it clearly. She only knew that it was a man with a high hat on his head, but she couldn't see who he was. She could only see a pair of beautiful and gloomy eyes. She suddenly opened her eyes and stared at the pair of eyes in front of her. She subconsciously touched the pair of eyes with trembling fingers and asked, Who are you? Did you have a nightmare?" Chu Luchin reached out to hold her slender hand and only felt that it was cold under his fingers. She must have been frightened, so his voice softened. Xiao Wanru blinked. After a long while, she saw clearly that it was Chu Luchin in front of her. Looking at his gentle eyes, he was completely different from the gloomy eyes in the dream just now. Sure enough, the dream was a dream, and it was fake. For a moment, her tight heartstrings suddenly broke. She reached out to hold Chu Luchin and burst into tears. Chu Luchin was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect that Xiao Wanru would suddenly lose control and burst into tears. Thinking of what had happened recently, he raised his eyebrows and asked while reaching out to hold Xiao Wanru's thin body, "Did Xiao Yanru bully you?" There was a bit of bloodthirsty coldness in his handsome eyes. He didn't mind directly reaching out to deal with Xiao Yanru, even if there was someone behind Duke Xing's mansion. No, Xiao Wanru said while crying and even choked. Chu Luchin reached out to pat her back gently and said, "Who else could it be if not her?" "I had a nightmare," Xiao Wanru said vaguely. Even though she choked with sobs, she could still sense Chu Liuchin's anger. She didn't want Chu Luchin to intervene in this kind of thing. "Well, don't be afraid. It's okay. What kind of nightmare could make you cry like this?" Hearing that it was because of a nightmare, Chu Luchin smiled, reached out to pat Xiao Wanru on the back, and comforted her. His eyes fell on her little face with a trace of childishness. As expected, she was still a child. How could she be so frightened by a nightmare? His hands fell on Xiao Wanru's back and became softer. It was very quiet in the room, except for Xiao Wanru's crying and Chu Liuchen's gentle coaxing from time to time. Yu Jie looked at Xiao Xuanzi, who was standing beside her, and walked to the side in disgust. She didn't want to stand with him. Originally, she wanted to go in to serve the miss, but she was stopped by Xiao Xuanzi. Looking at a weak person who was stronger than her, Yu Jie was really in a bad mood. Seeing Yu Jie avoid him, Xiao Xuanzi came up to her again and said with a smile, "Why are you in such a hurry? Our master is here. Fifth miss will stop crying in a while." He said it so naturally, as if his master was good at coaxing people. Yu Jie snorted softly. Was Prince Chun the kind of person who was good at coaxing people? No matter how she looked at it, it was possible for him to make her miss cry. Originally, her miss was quiet, but why did she cry as soon as Prince Chun went in? However, Yu Jie was not in a hurry. Her trusted subordinates were very clear about the relationship between her miss and Prince Chun. Chapter 756. It became quiet in the room, and only Xiao Wanru's occasional sobs could be heard. Xiao Wanru lowered her head and blushed. After the confusion just now, she found how ambiguous their posture was. Chu Luchen sat in the rattan chair and held her, who was crying. She didn't feel anything when she cried excitedly just now. Now that she was sober, she didn't know how to face others. She buried her head tightly. In fact, she couldn't cry anymore. Now she was thinking about how to get out of this embarrassing situation. What's wrong? Don't cry anymore? Chu Luchen looked down at Xiao Wanru in his arms, who almost buried her whole face in his arms. He was in a good mood. He raised the corners of his thin lips with an elegant and gentle smile and reached out to touch Xiao Wanru's hair. His touch made her heart beat rapidly, as if it was about to jump out of her chest. She curled her fair and tender fingers and slowly let go of Chu Liuchen's sleeves. She bit her lip uncomfortably and wanted to move away from Chu Liuchen's arms. Unexpectedly, the hand on her waist became heavier and pressed her body into his arms again. "Do you want to cry for a while more?" he asked. His teasing voice came lazily, which made Xiao Wanru, who was so shy that she didn't know how to deal with it, a little angry. She pushed him hard, raised her face, and tried to pretend to be indifferent and serious. "Your Highness, put me down." Her little face was tight, and her long eyelashes fluttered a few times like butterfly wings. She was obviously very nervous and shy, but she looked like she was making threatening gestures. Chu Luchen couldn't help but laugh. He stretched out his other hand and gently pinched her pink little face. Her face was as smooth as a fine jade. Then he saw the jade turn red little by little. He couldn't help chuckling and reached out his hand to pinch her little face again. Xiao Wanru reached out to push his hand away, and then pushed him away. She almost fell off Chu Luchen because of the rebound. Fortunately, Chu Luchen reached out to help her stand in front of the chair. "Sit down." Knowing that Xiao Wanru was so shy that she was about to smoke, Chu Luchen smiled and pointed to another rattan chair in front of him, narrowed his eyes and said, "This rattan chair was not as big as the one before, but Xiao Wanru could sit on it." Seeing that he didn't mention what had happened just now, Xiao Wanru sat on the rattan chair with a red face and put a strand of her beautiful hair to her ear. She looked a little messy and impolite, but Chu Luchen felt that she looked more and more pleasing to the eye. He looked her up and down. Xiao Wanru, who only looked at him, blushed and rushed up again. His whole body was burning hot, as if he was about to burn up. "Your side is too hot. Actually, you can sit here with me. This chair is big and we can sit together." Chu Luchen patted the chair he was sitting on and said with a faint smile. Xiao Wanru glared at him fiercely. This person was so bad. He clearly knew the reason, but still said such words. "I'm not hot," she said angrily in shame and hatred. She clenched the handkerchief in her hand tightly, refusing to look at the face that was so handsome that it was almost evil. This person did it on purpose. Chu Luchen moved and looked sideways at Xiao Wanru's blushing face. He stood up and reached out to pull the wide rattan chair to Xiao Wanru. He pulled away the table, which was originally placed in the middle, and said impatiently, "You're really in the way." Xiao Wanru was almost stunned to see him push the table away, pull the rattan chair over, and then sit beside her as if it was a matter of course. How could he still be so natural? She also felt that the table was too much of a hindrance. What was it? Everyone's table was placed between two chairs. While feeling ashamed and angry, she inexplicably felt a trace of warmth in her heart, which diluted the dull feeling of suffocation in the nightmare just now. At this moment, at least she was real, not in a dream, and not the miserable self in the dream. Now she was real, and the last life had passed. There was sunlight slanting in through the window. The sunshine in winter was the warmest, and at this moment, it warmed her heart. She moved slightly and leaned to the side. It was such a wide chair, but Chu Luchen leaned to her side, which was really embarrassing. "Don't move. It's good to lean like this." Chu Luchen pulled Xiao Wanru's sleeve and brought her body, which had been leaning to the other side, to his side. Then he put one hand around her shoulder and said, "After the consort selection, I can come to see you openly." Xiao Wanru looked at him with a red face and was speechless. He also knew that he could not come to see her openly. Imperial grandmother has already known about it. You can live with others in the palace. If the first miss of your mansion wants to take action, let me do it. Chu Liuchen's eyebrows and eyes became sharp, and a trace of darkness flashed across the bottom of his eyes. Knowing that he was worried about her, Xiao Wanru lowered her head, turned over the handkerchief in her hand, shook her head, and said, "Don't do anything to Xiao Yinru. Duke Xing's mansion is not simple, so is she. It's very bad to intervene rashly. I can deal with her." After being reborn, she had seized the first opportunity and was no longer blinded by the so-called family affection. Xiao Yinru was no longer the high and mighty Xiao Jiaoyi, and she was no longer the lonely female painter. Even if she entered the palace, she could only be tortured by Xiao Yinru and even died in her hands in the end. At this moment, she and Xiao Yinru were standing on the same level. Neither of them was much higher than the other, and they were almost equal. Even because of her maternal grandmother, she looked more noble on the surface and more justifiable from her father's side. Then be careful. If you can't deal with her, tell me. No matter who she is, I won't spare her. Chu Luchen nodded and said in a clear voice with a bit of coldness, which was not like his genial appearance in front of others. But this was the real him. Chu Luchen, who was born in this situation, could not really be a harmless and handsome young man who walked out of a painting. "I will be careful." Xiao Wanru nodded and said after hesitating for a moment, "I heard that this matter involves pie again. It's said that the powder that third sister was poisoned by is pie." She had to tell Chu Luchen about it in case he accidentally bumped into it. Originally, it was a dispute between the beauties, but now it had become a dispute between the outer court. What he threatened Xiao Zaihuan that day was not entirely a threat. It was not a simple matter that the tributes of the Su state, which had been in the treasury, disappeared. If it was really found that it had something to do with Duke Xing's mansion, even if Duke Xing's mansion was powerful, it would inevitably be implicated, and the result would be unknown. This matter has come to an end. My uncle flew into a rage in the main hall and saw a large number of officials of the treasury being implicated. Many people were implicated, and Vice Minister Wang was also in a bad situation. Although we can't find out that it has something to do with him, it is certain that his daughter has been poisoned by this kind of incense. Now he has been demoted. Chu Luchen knew that she was very uninformed in the deep palace, so he looked at her and said with a smile. Talking about business, the blush on Xiao Wanru's face slowly faded, and she looked natural now. If it weren't for the fact that he still put his arms around her and let her lean against his chest, she felt that she would be more at ease at this time. Knowing that she couldn't compete with him with her strength, she might as well let him be. In any case, this person had always been very domineering. Originally, when the two of them hadn't said it out, she already felt that way. Now that it was out, she realized that not only was he domineering, he was also protective of his food. Thinking of this, the blush that had just faded a little came up again. Seeing Xiao Wanru's blushing face again, Chu Liuchen's eyes flashed and he asked lazily, "How should we deal with that girl surnamed Wang?" Xiao Wanru bit her lip, suppressed the shyness in her heart, and said after thinking for a while, "Let her be." Wang Yusin would not be in a good situation now. She had made such a big mistake and even got her father into trouble. The whole Wang's mansion would not protect her. Even if she married far away, she would have to do it without others knowing. She would definitely marry a low-class person, or even a low-class one or two. In the last life, Wang Yusin had Xiao Yinru's helper. Now, although Wang Yusin was still Xiao Yinru's helper, she had removed this helper long ago. What would happen next would depend on Wang Yusin's fate. Chu Luchen thought for a moment and said evilly, "Let her be. Tomorrow, I'll introduce a good husband to her and find a businessman to marry her." Find a businessman? Xiao Wanru raised her face in surprise. The status of a businessman was not high. Wang Yusin, who wanted to stay in the consort selection, could only marry a businessman in the end. How could she, who was quite arrogant, bear it? "Of course I'm going to find a businessman, but I'm afraid it's not easy to find one now," Chu Luchen said lazily. With a flash in her eyes, Xiao Wanru raised the corners of her mouth and pinched the handkerchief with her fingers. She had always been a cold person and would not be kind to someone who had harmed her. Wang Yusin deserved to end up like this. "When you're free, I'll take you to the Wang's mansion to have a look and pick a good garden." Chu Luchen looked at her soft and beautiful side face with a playful smile. Her long eyelashes cast uneven shadows on her eyelids, which made her look very lovely. Originally, he was just joking, but at this time, he unconsciously became a little more serious. "Why should I pick?" Xiao Wanru didn't keep up with his thoughts for a moment. She raised her head in astonishment and looked sideways at him. "Pick a good one. I can take it as my bridal chamber and use it when I marry you. Since it will be the two of us living in the future, we should naturally satisfy you," Chu Luchen said. His words made Xiao Wanru blush again. She secretly gritted her teeth. He really had the nerve to say that. Chu Luchen laughed sullenly. His usually clear voice sounded a little hoarse because of the sullenly suppressed laughter, but it made people feel that his laughter was coming from the heart. It was a little soft and sweet, but also a little inexplicable shame and annoyance. Xiao Wanru simply ignored him and turned her head to look at the bookshelf on one side. He was a prince, but he used to look very lonely. Even if he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. Why did he seem to be a different person now? Chapter 757. Are you angry? Seeing Xiao Wanru turn her face awkwardly, Chu Luchen knew that enough was enough, so he said softly. He reached out to touch Xiao Wanru's messy hair and stroked it twice, which reminded Xiao Wanru of the chubby cat she raised. Did she usually smooth the cat's hair like this? "Don't be angry. Tell me what you want. Are you used to living in the palace? If not, I'll ask Imperial grandmother to take you to her place." In the past, there were beauties accompanying the Empress Dowager in the harem. Chu Luchen said. He was afraid that she would suffer losses in Chuxiu Palace. Feeling sweet in her heart, she lowered her head and shook her head. "Don't bother Empress Dowager. I'm fine. It's okay to live in Chuxiu Palace. It's far from the harem. It's not good to live too close." It was not easy to be around the Empress Dowager, especially in such a situation where she was not in a proper position. It was easy to become a target for others. "Don't worry. Xiao Yenru is a ready-made target now. I'm safe here." Xiao Wanru was afraid that he would really go to the Empress Dowager, so she added worriedly. She said it with great certainty, and a smile appeared in her watery eyes. The harem had its own way of survival, and the previous dynasty had its own way of survival. If she intervened rashly, it would be easy to cause trouble. She didn't know what happened to Chu Luchen in the last life, but the bloody steps in her memory and so many dead women all showed the tragedy at that time. Who was he fighting with? It seemed that he had no opponents at that time, and all the opponents were too weak for him at that time. When the emperor was seriously ill, the so-called supervising crown prince was already considered to have ascended to the throne. Those who could seize the throne were either dead, injured, or weak. Who could be a match for him? But why would there be such a scene in her memory? There was another thing that she had never understood. In that case, why did Chu Luiyue listen to Xiao Yanru's words at all costs and kill her? Why did he do that? Did she have any value that he didn't know? Alright, if there's anything you can't handle, just tell this king. This king naturally has a way to deal with it. Hearing Xiao Wanru's words, Chu Luchen smiled and nodded. He looked at Xiao Wanru's messy hair and said, I'll ask Yu Jie to comb it for you later. It's messy. After saying that, he very naturally stroked her silky hair again, then moved his head closer, his warm breath almost hitting her face. It won't grow out during the consort selection. How about this prince combs your hair at that time? Prince! Xiao Wanru tried to tilt her head back to avoid his face, and her face involuntarily became hot. Combing her hair? How could he think of such a thing? How could he, a dignified Prince Qin, do such a thing? Wangye, why are you here? She blushed and changed the topic. Even in her 2 lives, she had never seen such a shameless person. One moment he was as handsome and elegant as an immortal, the next moment he was as evil and enchanting as a playboy, and he dared to say anything. Chu Luchen looked at the blush on the girl's jade-like face, which was like a white jade with a slight blemish. Her thin lips were tightly pursed, and she tried hard to make a dignified look. However, such a delicate and beautiful look, coupled with a pair of bright and watery eyes, made people feel pity for her no matter how they looked at her. She was obviously shy and uneasy, but she tried hard to be calm, which was really funny. Of course, Chu Luchen also knew that his laughter would definitely make her angry out of shame, so he simply pretended not to notice her forced calm look and said, I happened to have something to do and was looking for the picture album, so I passed by. Where's Madame O? Xiao Wanru listened carefully, but at this time, there was no sound from Madame O, who should have been there. Maybe he had something to do when this king came, so he left. Chu Luchen said casually. Of course, he would not say that he deliberately lured the female painter away. Why didn't you come to me when you were free? That place has been empty, and the scenery is much better than here. Chu Luchen said. I'll go there next time when I'm free. Seeing Chu Liuchen's burning eyes fall on her face, Xiao Wanru lowered her head in embarrassment. Inexplicably, she felt that her heart was beating fast and almost couldn't control it. She pinched the handkerchief harder and said, There are so many people in the Imperial Palace, and it's noisy. I'm afraid that someone will find out. So what? You've passed the halfway point now. Even if someone finds out, it doesn't matter. Of course, if you worry too much, I can think of a way so that you don't have to avoid me too much. Chu Luchen said with a smile. What? Xiao Wanru asked curiously. Xiao Wanru didn't expect that Xiao Yanru would really use the way that Chu Luchen joked about before she used it. Chu Luchen left after talking with Xiao Wanru for a while. Xiao Wanru stayed and sat for a while. Yu Jie tidied up her messy hair and clothes. When Madame O came back, she was sitting there quietly and reading the picture album. After Madame O apologized to her, the two of them evaluated some paintings. After that, Xiao Wanru came back from Madame O's place. As soon as she arrived at the gate of the Imperial Palace, she saw a figure flash by. Yu Jie took a few steps forward and quickly grabbed the person. It was the palace maid named Han Dan. Xiao Wanru looked the palace maid up and down and asked, Why did you run away after seeing me? I didn't see you, fifth miss. Han Dan stammered. Do you think that we are blind and can't see you hiding here on purpose? Yu Jie was so angry that she laughed. She pulled Han Dan's finger and pointed to the place where she had hidden before. You monitored the moves of the beauties in the Imperial Palace and followed them. If this matter is reported to the nanny in charge, you should be in serious trouble. Xiao Wanru looked at Han Dan calmly and said, Fifth Miss Xiao, I'm really useless. I was just working and didn't notice that Fifth Miss Xiao came. Han Dan denied it and knelt down in front of Xiao Wanru with a plop, looking extremely pitiful. When a passing beauty saw the scene in front of her, she stopped and looked at Xiao Wanru in astonishment. Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart. This palace maid was really not a simple person. Her behavior immediately made people feel that she was weak and she was the one who bullied the weak. In the Imperial Palace, no matter which family's daughter was No one dared to be presumptuous. Wang Yusin was a good example. She knew that Xiao Wanru couldn't do anything to her. Get up. Since you don't admit it, it's okay. If Big Sister knew that you were the witness that day, I don't know if she would still want to use you. Xiao Wanru glanced at the trembling palace maid calmly and said in a very low voice. He looked at the pitiful palace maid and said in a very low voice. After he finished speaking, he saw the palace maid's eyes widen in surprise. Satisfied, he lifted the corner of his skirt and walked inside. She ignored the palace maid's matter. When the passing beauty saw the scene in front of her, she didn't understand what was going on. She looked at the palace maid kneeling on the ground with a pale face and then looked at Xiao Wanru, who left leisurely. She shook her head, ignored this matter, and walked out. It was just a little palace maid's matter. Moreover, Fifth Miss Xiao didn't do anything to a little palace maid, so it was not a big deal. After the beauty left, Han Dan, who was kneeling on the ground, suddenly came to her senses. She hurriedly got up and chased after Xiao Wanru. When she got close to Xiao Wanru, she lowered her voice and said, Fifth Miss, please wait. What else can I do for you? Xiao Wanru stopped slightly but did not turn around. However, Yujia turned her head and glared at Han Dan fiercely with great dissatisfaction. Fifth Miss. It was the first miss who asked me to see if you had come back. Han Dan didn't dare to hide it and answered. If the fifth miss told her that she had testified that the first Miss Xiao acted stealthily and conspired with the maid, she would definitely get into trouble. The first Miss Xiao was not easy to deal with, and the fifth Miss Xiao was even more difficult to deal with. At this time, Han Dan also regretted that she had tried to please the two of them at that time. She had thought that the two of them were both noble and good-natured, but she didn't expect that she had misjudged them. Neither of them was easy to deal with, but now she could only go down and couldn't turn back even if she wanted to. Big Sister, what happened? Xiao Wanru's butterfly-like long eyelashes fluttered and she said slowly. With Xiao Yenru's cautiousness, it was impossible for her to do such a thing unless the benefits of this matter were really great. Prince Yu is at the first Mrs. Place. Han Dan gritted her teeth and had to tell the truth. She couldn't keep the fifth Miss Xiao here, and she would definitely see it when she went back. Why is Prince Yu here? Xiao Wanru listened carefully with rapt attention. This matter was so mysterious that she had to ask. Chuxiu Palace was the place where the consort selection was held. Before the dust settled, the princes had to avoid arousing suspicion. No one knew who would be chosen in the end. It could be one's own family, or it could be one's own brother. It could even be the emperor's woman in the Imperial Palace. In this case, it was inconvenient for everyone to come here before the official selection was made. Chu Liuyue's arrival was very strange. When the first Miss Xiao went out in the afternoon, she fell from the rockery. Prince Yu happened to pass by and saved her. He also asked the imperial physician to come and treat her. At this time, he is still in the first Miss Xiao's room. Since she had already started, Han Dan certainly wouldn't hide it anymore and told everything in detail. Xiao Wanru was stunned at first, and then she burst into laughter with a sweet smile. This method was really the same as what Chu Luchen had said before. They were indeed brothers, and their ideas were so similar. Of course, Chu Luchen just joked at that time, but Chu Liyue was impatient. He immediately came to Xiao Yenru's side because of this matter, and it seemed that he was supporting Xiao Yenru. It was hard for them to come up with this idea. They happened to meet Prince Yu when they fell, and then they got involved. It was always easy to leave a good impression when a hero saved a beauty, not to mention that the one he saved was such a charming beauty. Come on, let's go to see Big Sister. Xiao Wanru said with a smile and stepped forward with her eyes shining like colored glaze. She wanted to see what the two of them wanted to do together this time. She knew that Xiao Yenru would not resign herself to fate. Chapter 758. Xiao Wanru had to pass Xiao Yenru's room before entering her room. When she arrived at the door of Xiao Yenru's room, a little eunuch suddenly came out in a hurry and almost bumped into Xiao Wanru. Yu Jie pulled her back and took a step back to avoid the little eunuch. The little eunuch didn't expect that there would be someone here. After being stunned for a moment, he suddenly bowed deeply to Xiao Wanru and asked with a smile, Are you the fifth Miss Xiao of Duke Xing's mansion? Yes, my master. Yu Jie said. Xiao Wanru also looked the little eunuch up and down. He was a little eunuch whom she didn't know. Should he be Chu Liuyue's man? Now he even sent a little eunuch here. Did he attach great importance to Xiao Yanru? Fifth Miss, our prince wants to ask about the first Miss Xiao. Fifth Miss, please come in. The little eunuch said with a smile, as if he had come out not to find medicine but to invite Xiao Wanru. Xiao Yanru, who was lying on the bed in the inner room, changed her face dramatically and grasped a corner of the quilt with hatred. The palace maid who surrendered to her was also a useless one. She failed to stop Xiao Wanru and let her come over. She winked at Shuqi, who was standing aside. Shuqi looked at her hesitantly and then looked at the imperial physician sitting in the chair beside the bed who was feeling her pulse. Although the imperial physician was old, he was still a man. If she also went out, there would be only her master and the imperial physician in the room. Seeing that Shuqi was hesitant and kept glancing at the old imperial physician, Xiao Yanru also realized it. She took a deep breath and waved her other hand slightly, indicating that Shuqi didn't need to go out. It was indeed inconvenient at this time, but she was eager to know what Chu Liwei had said to Xiao Wanru. Imperial physician, how is my injury? Xiao Yanru asked. It should be fine, but you may have sprained your tendon. Be more careful these days. The imperial physician put down his hand and said slowly. In fact, it was really nothing serious. The imperial physician had just diagnosed it, but Prince Yu felt that he couldn't be careless about the beauties even if it was a trivial matter. In particular, the beauties had just been poisoned and disfigured. At that time, it might lead to another thing, so he had better be careful. The imperial physician could only come in for the second time to feel the first Miss Xiao's pulse. In order to show his attention, he specially asked the little eunuch of Prince Yu to go to the Imperial Institute of Hospital to get some ointment for the first Miss Xiao's sprained ankle. It was the servant girl who said this, but she also said that it was not very serious. Since it was not very serious, it was more appropriate to let the servant girl of the first Miss Xiao apply the medicine by herself. In the process of feeling the pulse just now, he found that the first Miss Xiao's pulse was also extremely calm. It seemed that she was startled and had palpitations, but there was nothing else. Xiao Yanru said, "Thank you." Yanru said, "The imperial physician." Xiao Yanru said, "Xiao of Yanru Xiao Xiao. Xiao Yanru of Xiao. Yanru. Shuqi, Xiao of Yanru should he prince. Yenti. Xiao and Prince, Shuqi, was. Shouldn't Prince Yu be by her bed at this time? Why did he go out and leave a little eunuch to listen to his orders? When the little eunuch saw Xiao Wanru, he even made an appointment with Xiao Wanru for Chu Liuyue. If Chu Liuyue hadn't planned to do so, the little eunuch would never have done so. She had thought that Chu Liuyue might not stay in her room for the sake of her reputation. She had asked Shuqi to check on him and found that Chu Liuyue was waiting in a pavilion not far from their room. It seemed that he was also very worried about her. After the imperial physician felt her pulse once, he felt her pulse again out of concern, which made Xiao Yanru sure that Chu Liuyue was worried about her. But why did he ask Xiao Wanru to go there? Xiao Yanru inexplicably felt that it was dangerous. It was not convenient for her to go out. It was best for Shuqi to go out. Shuqi had packed up the medicine box. She took out a bulging pouch from her sleeve and handed it to the imperial physician. "Thank you for coming here. Maybe I will have to trouble you in the future." The imperial physician took it with a smile, picked up the medicine box and walked out. Shuqi sent him out. The little eunuch and Xiao Wanru at the door had already left. He walked to the corridor and looked at the pavilion where Prince Yu had been before. As expected, he saw the fifth Miss standing there and bowing to Prince Yu. He stopped walking slightly. Why did Prince Yu want to see the fifth Miss? The imperial physician also stood in the corridor, looked at the servant girl who came out in the name of sending him out, and then looked at Prince Yu in the pavilion calmly. He turned around and left quietly. He had thought that the first Miss Xiao was a well-mannered person, but it turned out that she was just spying on Prince Yu. It was said that the first Miss Xiao had a good reputation. Now it seemed that she was just SOSO and had ulterior motives. Other people in the Imperial Palace didn't know what had happened in the Sioux state before, but several Imperial physicians in the Imperial Institute of Medicine were very clear about it. The first Miss Xiao was involved in it. It was said that the one who went out of the mansion was the third Miss of Duke Xing's mansion. Now the one invited by Prince Yu should be the fifth Miss of Duke Xing's mansion. The Imperial physician shook his head and carried the medicine box on his back again. The first Miss Xiao of Duke Xing's mansion was not a magnanimous person. She could even hurt a blood sister. Was there anyone else she couldn't hurt? She was not trustworthy. Xiao Yanru had never expected that a small negligence today would cause a disaster caused by the Imperial physician's distrust of her in the future. Chu Luiyue stood in the pavilion with his hands clasped behind his back. His bright eyes fell on Xiao Wanru with a bit of scrutiny and coldness. Xiao Wanru came over with the little eunuch. After bowing deeply to him, she lowered her head and stood aside. The wind blew, fluttering her loose dress, making her waistline even more slender. Under the thick winter clothes, her slender figure could be seen. Chu Luiyue's eyes became deep. "Fifth Miss, do you still remember me?" Chu Luiyue said. The lines on his face were very clear, and his natural cold aura could easily make people feel oppressed. Such a person gave people a sense of majesty, as if such a person would not do something shameful behind the scenes. But in fact, he not only did something shameful, but also did a lot of shameful things with Xiao Yanru, which could not be exposed to the public. In the end, it was even him who ordered her to die. She took a deep breath. The cold air rushed into her nose and suppressed the feeling of blood in her heart. It made her clearly realize who she was now and who the person in front of her was. Today, she was no longer a small painter who Chu Luiyue could punish at will. "Your Highness, we have met several times," Xiao Wanru said respectfully. She did not raise her head and only looked at the corner of the bluestone ground in front of her. Although her behavior was respectful, her tone was very cold. She did not look like a miss from an aristocratic family who would be shy when seeing him. Chu Luiyue frowned and felt a little uncomfortable. The meaning of her words made him very unhappy, as if he was the one who came up to strike up a conversation. "When we first met in Jiangzhou, the fifth Miss was still young. I didn't expect that the fifth Miss has grown up," Chu Luiyue said slowly. Although his voice still sounded cold, it was different from the previous cold momentum. It was slightly soft. Her eyes fell on Xiao Wanru's beautiful hair, which was simply tied with a very simple pearl hairpin. Her beautiful hair was like a cloud, and then she couldn't see anything else. Her eyebrows were lowered, and her attitude was extremely respectful. Her attitude was even more gentle. This beautiful girl who was as beautiful as a flower actually had such a temperament. It was more and more admirable. However, he also wanted to find out the truth behind this gentleness and respect. She was not of age yet. This kind of temperament was really rare. In fact, his mansion needed this kind of girl who could be steady at any time. In the past, Chu Luiyue had always thought that Xiao Yanru's temperament was extremely steady among the misses from aristocratic families, and he admired her very much. However, the fifth Miss Xiao in front of him seemed to be more steady, even though she was younger than Xiao Yanru. "I was unreasonable in Jiangzhou and offended Prince Yu," Xiao Wanru said. She answered methodically. "It has been 3 years since we parted from each other in Jiangzhou. If I had known that the fifth Miss would eventually choose a candidate, I should have made friends with the fifth Miss at that time." Chu Luiyue became gentle. His words seemed to be very generous without any personal feelings. However, if others heard it, they would definitely suspect that there was something between them at that time, so that Prince Yu said such words in such a regretful voice. Who can predict what happened in the past, just like no one can predict what will happen in the future? If Prince Yu has nothing to do, I will go to see my big sister first. I heard that she fell and I don't know how she is doing. Xiao Wanru raised her head and said with a slight smile. After that, she bowed sideways and turned to leave. This kind of frivolous attitude was almost different from her respectful attitude just now. Chu Luiyue looked at Xiao Wanru in surprise. He didn't expect that Xiao Wanru would really dare to do this. Did she know who she was talking to? "Fifth Miss Xiao, aren't you going to ask the first Miss Xiao how she fell?" With a thought, he blurted out the words, and a faint smile appeared on his cold face. Such a woman was not only exceedingly beautiful, but also had an interesting temperament. After saying that, he turned around, walked in front of Xiao Wanru in a few steps, and blocked her way. The pavilion was small, and there was only one step to the exit. Chu Luiyue stood at the entrance of the pavilion. If Xiao Wanru wanted to leave, she would have to squeeze past him. Of course, it was extremely indecent. Xiao Wanru calmed down and then slowly raised her head. Originally, she didn't want to get in touch with Chu Luiyue. As Chu Luiyue, who had directly killed her in the last life, she couldn't afford to offend him now. Naturally, she didn't intend to provoke him at this time. But now it was obvious that Chu Luiyue didn't intend to let her go like this. She didn't know whether it was Chu Luiyue's idea or Xiao Yanru's. But no matter who it was, she wouldn't escape if she couldn't. Your Highness, since you know, can you tell me about my big sister? Xiao Wanru slowly took a step back, slightly raised the corners of her mouth, and said with a sweet smile. Shuqi, who was in the corridor, saw Chu Luiyue stop Xiao Wanru in the pavilion. Her face changed greatly, and she hurriedly turned around and entered the room. As soon as she entered the door, she saw a person under the window and almost screamed in fear. Chapter 759. Shut up. Xiao Yanru said gloomily. Shuqi hurriedly shut up, pulled herself together, closed the door with her backhand, and walked to the window. A corner of the gauze curtain in front of the window was lifted. The window faced the corridor outside and the pavilion where Prince Yu was. Miss, Prince Yu stopped the fifth miss from leaving. Shuqi came up to Xiao Yanru, who was standing in front of the window and peeking through the gauze curtain, and reported in a low voice. Xiao Yanru's face was almost furious, and her face was as gloomy as the calm before the storm. She stood motionless in front of the window and looked at the pavilion outside quietly. The two people in the pavilion, the woman was beautiful, and the man was handsome and noble. They looked very pleasing to the eye, as if they were a match made in heaven. However, in Xiao Yanru's eyes, there was deep resentment. Prince Yu belonged to her, and she had fallen in love with him since she was a child. How dare Xiao Wanru covet him? She would definitely let that bitch die a horrible death. She pulled a corner of the window curtain with her hand, clenched it hard, and looked at the pavilion coldly. Seeing that her face was very terrible, Shuqi didn't dare to say anything more. She stood behind her and looked at the opened window, and even breathed carefully. As Xiao Yanru's principal maid, Shuqi certainly understood Xiao Yanru's intention. Prince Yu, whom the first miss cared about most, had an unusual relationship with the fifth Mississippi. The first miss was about to fly into a rage at this time. In the pavilion, Xiao Wanru's eyes were extremely calm. Her watery eyes, which were a little misty, looked particularly gentle, as if there were glistening water in them. As a girl under 15 years old, even if she stood in front of others gracefully, she still had an indescribable charm. Her bright lips made people involuntarily fall on her cherry lips. Her lips were extremely beautiful, which made people feel warm in their hearts. Although she asked Xiao Yanru, and it sounded like she cared about her, she asked after being stopped by him. It could be seen that she didn't want to ask or talk to him at first. This kind of feeling made Chu Luiyue dissatisfied. His eyes fell on her face again. When he first met her in the palace that day, 3 years later, he was almost shocked for a moment. He didn't expect that it was her, the little girl he met in Jiangzhou who climbed over the wall and came out. A girl changed 18 times before she grew up. Your Highness, can you tell me about Big Sister? Xiao Wanru said impatiently and tilted her head slightly to one side, unwilling to face Chu Luiyue's gaze. Today, shortly after I came out of the Empress's palace, I met the first Miss Xiao at the rockery. The first Miss Xiao should want to salute me, but I didn't expect that she would step on air and fall. After I asked someone to bring her here, I invited the Imperial physician. Just now, the Imperial physician also said that she was fine. Chu Luiyue coughed and said, "Thank you, Your Highness Prince Yu." Xiao Wanru bowed sideways. No matter how Xiao Yanru fought with her, in the eyes of outsiders, they were one and both of them were lineal daughters of Duke Xing's mansion. but she didn't understand what Chu Luiyue meant. Did it mean that Xiao Yanru was seducing him, but he actually had nothing to do with Xiao Yanru? Whether or not there was such a thing between the two of them, what did it have to do with him? Moreover, others didn't know the relationship between the two of them, but how could she not know? In the last life, even if Xiao Yanru entered the palace and was separated from Chu Luiyue by seniority, the two of them still got together. I heard that what happened to the third Miss Xiao has something to do with the fifth Miss Xiao, right? Chu Luiyue asked unhappily. Xiao Wanru looked up at him speechlessly. Didn't he find that she was unwilling to talk and end the topic? The previous topic had ended. Why did he start another topic? She glanced at Xiao Yanru's room. The door was closed tightly, as if there was no one inside, but she clearly knew that Xiao Yanru was inside. With Xiao Yanru's temperament, she must have been distracted to do such a thing. She was deceiving herself and trying to cover it up. Was it because of Chu Luiyue? Thinking of this, it was true. In the last life, the two of them colluded closely, which showed the relationship between them. Now Chu Luiyue actually said that Xiao Yanru was seducing him. Even if Xiao Yanru couldn't hear what they said, she must have seen Chu Luiyue stop her here. A corner of the gauze curtain at the window was slightly raised. Xiao Yanru raised the corners of her mouth silently and couldn't keep calm. It was a good thing that Xiao Yanru couldn't keep calm, but she really didn't want to say anything more to Chu Luiyue here. Every time she saw Chu Luiyue, she would think of her tragic ending in the last life and couldn't calm down. Maybe it would take a while for her to really hide this anger in her heart, but now she really couldn't calm down. In fact, I don't know what's going on. Your Highness, I want to see my big sister first. She has closed the door. She may be angry with me now. Xiao Wanru reached out and pointed at Xiao Yanru's door. Chu Luiyue turned his eyes and saw Xiao Yanru's tightly closed door. A trace of displeasure rose in his heart. Like Xiao Wanru, he also knew Xiao Yanru's character well. Given her character and she had always been able to keep calm, how could she do such a petty thing? Looking at the half-lifted curtain, Xiao Yanru frowned silently. Xiao Yanru was becoming more and more improper now. She deliberately fell in front of him this time, but now she was peeping from the window with the door closed. After thinking for a while, he leaned to one side and made way for her. Fifth Miss, go to see First Mississippi. It happens that I'm going to see her together. After saying that, he turned around and walked out. Since they were going the same way, Xiao Wanru had no choice but to follow him. They turned to the door of Xiao Yanru's room one after the other. The little eunuch went up to knock on the door. The door was unlocked. Hearing the knock, footsteps came from inside. Shuqi, the maid, appeared at the door in a hurry, as if she had just come out. Greetings, Your Highness. Greetings, Fifth Mississippi. Seeing the people at the door, Shuqi hurriedly bowed and lowered her head. Even so, the two of them still saw the panic on Shuqi's face. How is your first miss? Chu Luiyue asked. My first miss's foot may have a sprain. The Imperial physician just said. Shuqi hesitated for a moment, as if she didn't know what to say for a while. Her look indicated that Xiao Yanru was in trouble. Xiao Wanru stood behind Chu Luiyue calmly and quietly watched what they were going to do. Chu Luiyue frowned and said, if it's still not good, go to the Imperial physician again. Yes, Your Highness. My miss asked me to thank you. If you hadn't happened to pass by, I'm afraid that she wouldn't have been able to get a good treatment. The Imperial physician just said that if we delayed for a while, my miss's foot injury would be much more serious. Shuqi bowed respectfully again and said gratefully. It doesn't matter. Chu Luiyue turned around and Xiao Wanru made way for him. Fifth Miss, please take care of First Miss. Chu Luiyue said. Xiao Wanru didn't answer. She bowed sideways and then stood with her head down, unable to continue. Chu Luiyue frowned again. The girl in front of him seemed to be very gentle, but she seemed to be a little stupid and didn't know how to answer him. All the misses from aristocratic families he met would immediately come up to answer him shyly when they saw him. Even if they had nothing to say, they would bring up some topics. What was more, he gave her a topic, but she seemed to be unable to grasp it. He slightly lowered his eyes and pursed his lips. Fifth Miss, I have to trouble you to help me find out whether someone framed First Mississippi. Every time the beauties enter the palace for the draft, There are always such things. Some beauties who are likely to be selected fail to be selected because of some accidents. When Chu Luiwei said this, his face was cold, with the dignity he always had. Not to mention the misses from aristocratic families who were raised in boudoir, even the officials in the court did not dare to offend his dignity at this time. The officials all knew that Prince Yu was the most dignified among the princes. But the fifth Miss Xiao in front of him didn't seem to like him, nor was she afraid of him. Xiao Wanru smiled faintly and raised her eyes slightly. Her eyes were calm and gentle. Your Highness, I have to trouble the supervisor nanny to find out why Big Sister appeared there, whether there was someone in the palace who tipped off Big Sister, why did they frame Big Sister, and who benefited the most from it? She spoke with confidence and composure. She was neither fawning nor humble, as if she was talking about an ordinary thing. She didn't hear the other meaning in Chu Luiwei's words. Chu Luiwei frowned more deeply. He didn't like this feeling. His eyes swept over her little face, which was like a blooming spring flower. After the initial amazement, he was just amazed. Although he felt moved, it was really nothing compared with his great ambition. But this kind of complete neglect and even contempt made him very uncomfortable. He stared at Xiao Wanru deeply. Seeing that there was no shyness on her face, he couldn't help but feel annoyed. With a cold snort, he turned around and strode back. The little eunuch made an obeisance by cupping his hands to Xiao Wanru and hurriedly followed her. His master, who had always been emotionless and indifferent, seemed to be a little different. The little eunuch could still sense it, so he didn't dare to look down on the fifth Miss Xiao in front of him. Shuqi, how is Big Sister? Xiao Wanru walked inside and asked Shuqi, who was still standing there in a daze. Oh, the first miss is inside. Shuqi looked outside and saw that Prince Yu had strode away. She could only turn around helplessly and follow Xiao Wanru inside. The first miss actually wanted Prince Yu to come in and talk with him in private. But now that Prince Yu had left, she didn't dare to stop him. In the room, Xiao Yanru sat on the bed with a livid face. She heard the conversation outside clearly. When she saw Chu Luiwei coming, she went back to the inner room excitedly to lie down. Unexpectedly, Chu Luiwei just asked and didn't come in. Then her efforts were really in vain. Big Sister, how are you now? Xiao Wanru came in, looked at Xiao Yanru and asked lightly, at least 1 foot away from the bed. When there were no outsiders, Xiao Wanru really didn't bother to pretend to be close to her. Chapter 760. Remember in 1 second, 800 !say, net wonderful pop-up window free reading. Xiao Yanru pulled herself together, gritted her teeth secretly, and slowly showed a smile on her face. She leaned back and said softly, Thank you, fifth sister. I'm fine. Looking at Xiao Yanru's stiff face with a smile, Xiao Wanru suddenly showed a smile. In Xiao Yanru's eyes, this smile was inexplicably dazzling and even made her feel that Xiao Wanru's smile was a little shy, just like the expression of those misses from aristocratic families when they mentioned Chu Luiwei in the past. She wanted to mention it, but she was afraid that others would say it. In the past, when Xiao Yanru saw such a woman, she was extremely disdainful and even had a kind of psychological pride. Chu Luiwei was superior in others' eyes, but she was extremely close to him. As long as she nodded, she could marry Chu Luiwei. However, Xiao Wanru's smile made her almost unable to keep her stiff smile. Fifth younger sister, you seem to be very happy? She couldn't help but blurt out, who will be chosen by Prince Yu in the end? It's not certain who can go to Prince Yu's mansion in the end. Fifth sister, don't you think it's too early to be happy? Why do you say that, big sister? I'm very happy that big sister is fine, but why do you have something else to say? Prince Yu's mansion? Does big sister want to enter? Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows provocatively. Xiao Yanru felt embarrassed. She pulled the corner of the quilt with her hand and said with her face darkening, What are you talking about, fifth sister? We are going to the Imperial Palace for the consort selection. What will happen in the future, whether we will be selected or not, and what will happen after we are selected are not up to us. Fifth sister, what do you mean by saying that? Have you forgotten the girl's discipline? Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart. Xiao Yanru flew into a rage out of humiliation and just wanted to suppress herself. Big sister, what you said is so strange. It's you who said who will go to Prince Yu's mansion. This kind of thing is neither decided nor discussed by us. Why did you say so? Xiao Wanru said unhurriedly. Xiao Yanru was so angry that she reached out to point at Xiao Wanru, but she was interrupted by Xiao Wanru. Big sister, we both know what's going on between us. Why do we pretend to be sisters? Third sister has a deep sisterly relationship with you, but it has become like this. If I also have a deep sisterly relationship with you, I don't know what will happen. If there's nothing else, I'll go back first. With that, he turned around to leave. Xiao Yanru was so angry that she picked up a cushion beside her and threw it at Xiao Wanru while saying with hatred, Xiao Wanru, you are also a miss of our Duke Xing's mansion. How can you say that? Do you blame me for what happened to third sister? I didn't know either. How could I have known that someone would frame us? Even at this time, Xiao Yanru was still very cautious and did not dare to reveal anything. Yu Jie grabbed the cushion that was thrown over, glanced coldly at Xiao Yanru on the bed, and pursed her lips tightly. If it weren't for her master's permission, she even wanted to throw the cushion in her hand back. Big sister, I was the one who was framed at that time, wasn't I? I heard that the emperor is still investigating in secret. Not everyone can get the mixed poison of the Su state. Assistant Minister Wang may not be able to resist it. Xiao Wanru said with a slight smile. The angrier Xiao Yanru was, the calmer she was. For Xiao Yanru, what happened to Xiao Zaihuan was not fatal, but it was enough to make her the focus of others' attention. Moreover, the focus of attention was not on her gentle and dignified appearance in the past. This matter became a nail in Xiao Yanru's heart. The most terrible thing was that she couldn't remove it even if she wanted to. She would become more and more irritable and irrational. After saying that, Xiao Wanru left in spite of herself, leaving Xiao Yanru, who was panting heavily on the bed. After Xiao Wanru left, Xiao Yanru's face became more and more ugly. She gnashed her teeth with hatred and suddenly reached out to sweep the teacups and teapots on the table beside the bed to the ground, making a loud sound of breaking. Shuqi was so scared that she knelt down with a plop. The room was very quiet, strangely quiet. Shuqi couldn't help breaking out in a cold sweat on her forehead. It had been a long time since the first miss lost control and got angry like this. Xiao Wanru, I will definitely send her to the dirtiest and most despicable place. Her gnashing voice sounded particularly clear in the quiet room. The hatred in her voice made Shuqi, who was kneeling on the ground, shiver unconsciously. She lowered her head and dared not move. After a long while, she heard Xiao Yanru's voice, which had calmed down again, saying, Go to Prince Yu now and ask him why he didn't come in just now. She was in a bad situation in Chuxiu Palace now. Her 2 or 3 friends in the past were very vigilant when they saw her, which made her feel very passive. That was why she did what she did today. She didn't expect that Chu Luiwei would avoid arousing suspicion. After asking someone and Shuqi to help her come here, he had been waiting in the pavilion outside the door. She didn't expect that Chu Luiwei would block Xiao Wanru's way. They obviously had nothing to do with each other. Why did Chu Luiwei block Xiao Wanru's way? Thinking of Xiao Wanru's beautiful face, Xiao Yanru felt a strong sense of jealousy and couldn't swallow the hatred in her heart. When did Chu Luiwei get in touch with Xiao Wanru? What did they talk about in the pavilion just now? Why did Chu Luiwei, who had always been calm, block Xiao Wanru? He avoided arousing suspicion with her, but why didn't he avoid arousing suspicion with Xiao Wanru? Could it be that he took a fancy to Xiao Wanru? Thinking of this, Xiao Yanru's face became increasingly gloomy. She took a fancy to Chu Luiwei. Compared with Chu Liuzhou, the legitimate son, she took a fancy to Chu Luiwei. Stealing a glance at Xiao Yanru's gloomy face, Shuqi didn't dare to say more and hurriedly chased after him. In fact, Miss shouldn't be so angry at this time, let alone ask her to chase after him. Not to mention that Prince Yu might have left Chuxiu Palace at this time. Even if she caught up with him, Prince Yu wouldn't turn back because of the first Miss's words. There were many people in the palace. If the first Miss made such a scene, it would make people think that she wanted to cling to Prince Yu. However, Miss also hooked up with Prince Zhou. If she made a big fuss at this time, she would be in a mess. But she didn't dare to persuade her. Miss was so angry that she even wanted to eat the 5th Mississippi. But Miss was obviously not easy to bully. The first Miss's anger was concentrated in her heart. If she vented it on herself, she couldn't bear it. She could only carefully listen to Mississippi. Because she was in a hurry, Shuchi didn't notice that Xiao Wanru and her maid were looking at her at the door of the room inside. "Miss," Shuchi went out as expected. Yujie said. Looking at Shuchi's anxious look, it was obvious that she went to chase after someone. Xiao Wanru nodded slightly. Even if she goes out now, His Highness Prince Yu has already left. Can she let His Highness Prince Yu come back? Yujie asked curiously. She really felt strange. It was useless to run out in such a hurry, and it might even make Prince Yu angry. She saw clearly just now that Prince Yu obviously didn't want to have anything to do with the 1st Mississippi. He didn't even enter the room and looked more like a stranger. Although Prince Yu seemed to be very close to the 1st Miss in his later words and asked her to help take care of the 1st Miss, only a few people heard his words at that time. In addition to Prince Yu's people, Yujie and Shuchi, the 1st Miss's maid, couldn't be the kind of people who could spread the news. Now that she went out like this, there were many people who saw her in the dark. Xiao Yanru is in a mess. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly, turned around and walked slowly into the room. The isolation of the beauties made Xiao Yanru panic, so she wanted to make use of Chu Liyue's influence. Chu Liyue didn't allow her to do so. In addition, what she had said before made Xiao Yanru feel a crisis. Now she was eager to catch Chu Liyue. Under the control of these negative emotions, Xiao Yanru would make stupid moves again and again. At this time, she should give her another push. After Xiao Zaihuan's matter, Xiao Yanru didn't dare to deal with her for the time being. The other 2 misses of Duke Xing's mansion had been in trouble one after another, and they all had something to do with her. She couldn't absolve herself from the guilt, but Chu Liyue was different. Xiao Wanru stopped, suddenly smiled slyly, turned around and suggested, "Let's go out and have a look." As she said, she went out. Yujie followed her with a blank look and followed Xiao Wanru back to the previous pavilion. The pavilion was diagonally opposite Xiao Yanru's room, and it should be directly opposite Xiao Zaihuan's room. At this time, it was sunset, and the sky was full of clouds and colorful. The location of this pavilion was very good. One side was against the wall, and the other side was a rockery. The wind was not strong, but the sun was shining. It was an excellent place for relaxation in winter. Xiao Wanru had never been to this pavilion before. At this time, she narrowed her eyes and looked at the clouds in the western sky. Then she asked Yujie to fetch a cushion, wipe the fence, and sit down. Yujie specially fetched a pot of tea and some pastries and brought them over. When Shuchi ran back with a head full of sweat, she saw Xiao Wanru sitting leisurely in the pavilion, drinking tea and eating pastries, talking with Yujie with a smile on her face. Her voice was very low, as if Yujie was teasing her. She smiled shyly and even hit Yujie with a handkerchief. Yujie took 2 steps back with a smile. This time, she said in a louder voice, "Miss, I don't dare to talk nonsense anymore. Please spare me." Hearing the smile and the voice, Shuchi thought of the scene she had seen before and Prince Yu's attitude. Shuchi clenched her hands hard, turned into the room, and closed the door. In the room, Xiao Yanru looked behind Shuchi expectantly. When she saw that there was no one behind her, she lowered her eyes, but still didn't give up and asked, "When did Prince Yu say he would come?" Prince Yu means that if you feel uncomfortable, you should go to invite an imperial physician. As a prince, it is inconvenient for him to meddle in the affairs of Chuxiu Palace. Although he has a good relationship with the first young master, he can't treat you specially because of the first young master. Shuchi didn't dare to hide it. Thinking of Prince Yu's cold eyes just now, Shuchi felt bitter from the bottom of her heart. She didn't dare to ask Prince Yu if he had changed his mind, but she thought so. Not only Prince Yu's attitude, but also the 5th Miss's behavior and performance just now. Chapter 761. Does Prince Yu refuse to come? Xiao Yanru said with a gloomy face. His Highness means that you don't have to worry. You'll find a way. Shuchi stammered. She roughly summed up the so-called meaning by herself. Where's Xiao Wanru? Xiao Yinru asked with the viciousness in her eyes almost overflowing. She thought it was all Xiao Wanru's fault. In the past, Prince Yu would not be like this. It must be because of Xiao Wanru. She hated Xiao Wanru and wished she could skin her alive and dig out her heart now, but she also knew that it was not the right time to kill Xiao Wanru right now. The fifth miss is in the pavilion where she talked with Prince Yu just now. She looks happy and even prepared tea and snacks. Shuqi said angrily. After saying that, she found that she had deliberately added the words, talked with Prince Yu. She was a little flustered and hurriedly lowered her head for fear of being punished by Xiao Yinru. Bitch, she is indeed a bitch. Xiao Yinru was furious and gritted her teeth hard. Prince Yu was the person she liked, but Xiao Wanru came to snatch him away. Moreover, Prince Yu also had the same intention. How could Xiao Yinru bear it? She originally wanted to shock other beauties with Prince Yu's special treatment of her and let them understand who was the final winner. Unexpectedly, she found that Chu Luiyue seemed to be a little alienated from her. How could she bear it? After so many years of planning, how could it fail at the most critical moment? Her eyes were empty, and she stared coldly at a place in the air. In any case, she must let Chu Luiyue come to Chuxiu Palace again for her. Tomorrow, go to invite Prince Yu again. Tell him that I have something important to tell him and ask him to come as soon as possible. Xiao Yinru said slowly. Where can I find Prince Yu? Shuqi hesitated. She was in the palace now and couldn't walk around. It was impossible for her to know where Prince Yu was. As a little maid brought by a beauty, she might even lose her life if she was not careful. What are you afraid of? I'll help you find him, Xiao Yinru said coldly. Wang Yusin had told her where Chu Luiyue might be. She didn't care where Chu Luiyue was. At that time, she even said that Prince Yu might really like Wang Yusin and asked her to cherish him. She also secretly congratulated her, saying that she would be the future Princess Yu, and coaxed Wang Yusin to tell her everything she knew. She didn't care about it before because she knew that Chu Luiyue couldn't really like Wang Yusin. At most, he would be a concubine, which Chu Luiyue had mentioned to her before. In order to help Chu Luiyue ascend to that position, Xiao Yinru once said that she would not care about these things. As long as Chu Luiyue was good, she could do anything, even if she suffered some grievances. She didn't care about it when Chu Luiyue treated her wholeheartedly and cared about her. Now Xiao Yinru felt the crisis, so how could she not care about it? She couldn't let Xiao Yinru take the position of Princess Yu. If Xiao Wanru had to marry into Prince Yu's mansion, she could only be the lowest concubine. Therefore, she had to seize the opportunity and must not let Xiao Wanru take the lead. Yes, I'll go there tomorrow, but will Prince Yu not come? Shuqi was still a little hesitant and said uneasily. Being rejected once again, the young miss would definitely vent all her anger on him. He won't. Just say that it's something important about Wang Yusin. Xiao Yinru gritted her teeth and mentioned Wang Yusin after thinking for a while. If it were in the past, she was sure that Chu Luiyue would definitely come, but now she was not so sure, and even had to mention Wang Yusin. She clenched her fingers into fists, feeling annoyed and resentful. She made up her mind that if Chu Luiyue didn't come, she would turn to Chu Liuzhou and help him deal with Chu Luiyue. Although it was inconvenient for Chu Liuzhou to do things because of the tyrannical empress, as long as Chu Liuzhou promised her the position of Princess Yu and promised to do so forever, she could still consider him. She took a deep breath, looked at the screen coldly and asked, "Is Xiao Wanru still in the pavilion outside?" "Yes, she was when I came here, but I don't know if she is now," Shuqi reported. "Go and see if she is there. If she is not there, bring the palace maid named Han Dan here secretly. I have something to ask her," Xiao Yinru said. There were not many people in the palace who could be used, and Shuqi was too busy to handle it alone. Moreover, it was easy to attract attention by using Shuqi, so the best way was to use people in the palace. This palace maid named Han Dan was not bad. She seemed to be smart, and she took the initiative to show kindness to Xiao Yinru again and again. If there was any news, she would report it to Xiao Yinru as soon as possible. Xiao Yinru had a good impression of her. In Wang Yusin's case, the chief eunuch had sent someone to investigate Han Dan. Xiao Yinru didn't know much about it. She only knew that some palace maids had seen her and Shuqi acting suspiciously. Because this was not real evidence and could not prove anything about her, it was just a suspicion at most, so she didn't ask her to confront the palace maid named Han Dan face to face. At this moment, Xiao Yinru thought that this palace maid had sincerely surrendered to her. Xiao Yinru was not so easy to trust others with her character. However, the only person she could use now was Shuqi. It was not easy to find a palace maid who had surrendered to her. Moreover, she found that this palace maid had done a good job these days and was indeed loyal to her, so she decided to use her first. When Shuqi went out again, Xiao Wanru and her maid were no longer there. Looking at the empty pavilion, she carefully walked to the door of Xiao Wanru's room, only to find that the door had been closed, and both Xiao Wanru and her maid were inside. It was time for dinner. The little eunuch who delivered the food put down the food and was about to leave. Shuqi went out and gave the little eunuch a pouch with a smile. The little eunuch took it with a smile. Shuqi lowered her head and said something to him. The little eunuch nodded repeatedly, looked around, and left after making sure that no one was looking at him. Before long, Han Dan, the palace maid, sneaked into Xiao Yenru's room at night. As a little palace maid, she was inconspicuous in Chuxiu Palace. Now it was night, and the beauties in winter were all delicate and noble. How could they come out at this time? Now that something had happened, no one dared to go out and was even more unwilling to go out. If she went out at this time, no one would see her. Your name is Han Dan? Xiao Yenru sat under the lamp, dressed gorgeously and dignified, and her hair was meticulously combed. She looked beautiful and behaved in a dignified and decent manner. Even though she was in the inner chamber at such a time, she still had the bearing of a miss from an aristocratic family. Han Dan was immediately convinced. Even some S in the Imperial Palace didn't have such a bearing. She had seen the Empress from a distance, and it seemed that the Empress had such a calm and composed manner. Yes, my name is Han Dan. Han Dan said timidly. You are an excellent one. If I have a chance in the future, I will definitely give you a great blessing. Xiao Yenru said with a smile and a calm look. She was still the noble eldest lineal daughter of Duke Xing's mansion and the long-renowned first beauty in the capital city. Thank you, First Miss Xiao. Thank you, First Miss Xiao. This servant will definitely serve you wholeheartedly. Han Dan was extremely excited. What she wanted was such an opportunity to stand out. Now that the opportunity was presented to her, how could she refuse it? She was so excited that her eyes turned red. Although she was young, she had been in the Imperial Palace for several years. Seeing her sisters die one by one for various reasons, Han Dan felt that the only way to live a better life was to climb up the social ladder. She wanted to be a chief palace maid and a decent person. If there was a chance, she would even climb onto the imperial bed. It's the best that you can think in this way. Xiao Yenru slowly wiped the corners of her mouth with a handkerchief, and her eyes flickered in the light. Now there is one thing that I need you to investigate. If you do well, I will take you with me. If not, First Miss, rest assured, I will definitely do a good job. Han Dan hurriedly expressed her loyalty. It's not an important thing. Do you know Prince Zhou? Xiao Yenru asked. I know. Prince Zhou is the legitimate son of the Empress and has a noble status. Han Dan was so excited that her heart almost jumped out of her mouth. Did the first Miss Xiao mean that she had a relationship with Prince Zhou? Check the whereabouts of Prince Zhou, find out where he is most likely to appear, and whether he will come to Chuxiu Palace. If he comes to Chuxiu Palace, you must report to me as soon as possible. Xiao Yenru said slowly. Shuqi looked at Xiao Yenru in surprise and didn't understand why she mentioned Prince Zhou at this time. She hadn't settled the matter with Prince Yu. If she mentioned Prince Zhou, it would be easy for her to get into trouble. First Miss, I'm just a palace maid. I dare not inquire about Prince Zhou's whereabouts at will, or I will be beaten to death. Han Dan stammered and said with a bitter face. She didn't evade. She couldn't ask too much about her identity, because it would arouse suspicion. I just want to ask about his usual whereabouts. If Prince Zhou comes, You must tell me immediately. Besides, if you can't find out his whereabouts, you can keep an eye on my fifth sister for me. Xiao Yanru said leniently. It seemed that because Han Dan failed to do the first thing, she deliberately found another simple thing to do. It seemed that Han Dan had gained an advantage by asking about Prince Zhou in exchange for keeping an eye on a little beauty. If it were someone else, Han Dan would definitely be overjoyed and thank her at this time, but it was the fifth Miss Xiao. Han Dan's heart pounded wildly. Among the people she was afraid of, Xiao Wanru must be on the list, and her position was the highest. Whether it was Prince Zhou or Prince Yu, these people were all superior. Even if she was afraid, they usually had nothing to do with her, and they would not make trouble for her, a little palace made for no reason. But this fifth Miss Xiao was different. Every time she saw her, she would show a meaningful smile. The fifth Miss Xiao's smile was very beautiful, but in Han Dan's eyes, the fifth Miss had been pinching her weak spot, so that she didn't dare to disobey her at all. The first Miss Xiao wanted to deal with the fifth Miss Xiao. Han Dan looked up in a panic, opened her mouth, and subconsciously wanted to say something. Chapter 762. Remember in 1 second, 800 $say net there was no pop-up window for free reading. What's wrong? Don't you want to? Xiao Yanru raised her eyes, looked down at her and asked. She looked gentle, as if it was just a trivial compensation. Since she couldn't finish the task of Prince Zhou, she would finish the task of keeping an eye on Xiao Wanru. Han Dan's fingers trembled, and she didn't dare to hesitate anymore. Yes, I will keep an eye on the fifth Miss Xiao. If there is anything unusual about the fifth Miss Xiao, I will definitely report it to the first Miss. This was her proof of allegiance. She had to accept it, and she didn't dare to refuse. She had now known the first Miss Xiao's secret. If she didn't help her, it would be very easy for the first Miss Xiao to kill her, a little palace maid, even if she wanted to deal with the fifth Miss Xiao. Not only if there is anything unusual, but also pay more attention to ordinary things. My fifth sister is very clever, and there may be something wrong. Pay more attention to her, lest she does something wrong and do something that will affect the whole Duke Xing's mansion. Xiao Yanru said slowly. Han Dan nodded in a panic, and Xiao Yanru reminded her again. After saying a few words to her, Xiao Yanru asked her to leave first. Shuqi led Han Dan out. After opening the door and seeing that there was no one outside, she asked Han Dan to go back, closed the door, and returned to the inner room. In the inner room, Xiao Yanru was still sitting under the lamp with a cold look in her eyes. Miss, pick a clever little eunuch to run errands in secret, and then ask him to do things for us. Xiao Yanru interrupted her and said. She still didn't have enough people. One palace maid was not enough, so she had to find someone else. Moreover, she didn't trust a little palace maid very much. Miss, do you mean to pick a few more? Shuqi asked. No, just a little eunuch will do. Xiao Yanru shook her head. If there were too many people, they would be easily discovered. She didn't dare to use the palace maids openly. If it was found that she, a beauty, had bribed eunuchs and palace maids in the palace, she would definitely get into big trouble. Yes, miss, I understand. I'll pick the little eunuch who delivers food. What do you think? He seems to be clever and quick. Shuqi, who had never seen a little eunuch alone in daily life, thought for a while and said, Then pick him. Observe carefully for a few days. Xiao Yanru nodded. At the moment, this little eunuch was indeed the most suitable one. There were 4 rooms in a row on their side, and now only the innermost room and the outermost room were occupied. Only a little eunuch had sent her and Xiao Wanru a portion of food. If she could make this little eunuch work for her, it would be more than just monitoring. It's him. Be careful and give him more money. Xiao Yanru made the final decision again. In the candlelight, her eyes were full of viciousness. You said my big sister asked you to spy on me? Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and glanced over Xiao Yanru's indifferent face silently with her watery eyes. She asked in an extremely casual tone and didn't look as noble and dignified as Xiao Yanru usually did. However, her eyes seemed to be able to see through people's hearts with deep coldness. Even if he was smiling, the smile did not reach his eyes. This kind of smile made Han Dan increasingly feel that she was right to come here just now. If the fifth Miss Xiao found out that she was spying on her, she would really lose her life. Since the matter of Wang Yusen, she didn't dare to disobey the fifth Miss Xiao, because the fifth Miss Xiao had something on her. Now she had to think about this matter before doing anything. As long as the fifth Miss Xiao used her as a witness to deal with the first Miss Xiao, her life would be spared. The first Miss Xiao would not tolerate her. She also thought of sneaking a few glances behind the fifth Miss Xiao and then reporting it to the first Miss Xiao. However, after thinking about it, she still didn't dare to fool two people at the same time. The first Miss Xiao could tell at a glance that she was not fooled. The fifth Miss Xiao and her maid were very sensitive. As long as she appeared in front of them, they would definitely find out. She just wanted to stall for time before, but she was discovered by the fifth Miss Xiao and had to tell the truth. After thinking about it last night, Han Dan came to see the fifth Miss Xiao today with two big circles under her eyes. She felt that it was better to tell the truth. At least she had told the truth before. She had been living well, and the fifth Miss Xiao had not used that against her. She also regretted that she had listened to the fifth Miss Xiao at that time. Not only could she please the fifth Miss Xiao, but she could also keep the first Miss Xiao in the palace. If the first Miss Xiao really stayed in the palace because of this, it would be great if she could become her master. She was a palace maid. If she wanted to find a master, it would be best if the master could stay in the palace. Otherwise, no matter how good the master was, it had nothing to do with her. Because of this, she had been coerced by the fifth Miss Xiao's maid to be a witness, and now it had become a huge mountain on her head. It was already after lunch. Xiao Wenru took Yu Jie to walk and eat casually. After learning etiquette and rules for the whole morning, she was a little tired even though she had learned them. When they arrived at this courtyard, Han Dan rushed out of the dark and knelt in front of her. "Yes, the first miss asked me to keep an eye on you. She said that if there was anything, I must report it to her first, not only the special things, but also the daily calculations." Han Dan lowered her head and said, "You want to know everything? My big sister really cares about me. Tell me the reason." Xiao Wenru said with a little joy in her voice, as if she was really happy. Han Dan stammered, For fear that the fifth miss will do something bad, affect the whole Duke Xing's mansion." "Something bad?" Xiao Wenru thought for a while and said with an increasingly leisurely smile, "Get up." Shuqi came over to help Han Dan up and patted the dust on her sleeves with a handkerchief. "You can keep an eye on me," Xiao Wenru said. Han Dan's heart skipped a beat and she raised her head in a hurry. She only felt a little thirsty and didn't know what to say. She only felt that the fifth Miss Xiao's clear eyes were as beautiful as the sparkling water, but she couldn't see through what was dark under the water. "You can keep an eye on my whereabouts and tell my big sister, but before reporting it, you must do as I say," Xiao Wenru continued to say. "Yes, I know." At this time, Han Dan didn't dare to argue. "I basically have nothing to do these 2 days. After lunch, I sometimes walk around and sometimes go to the studio to have a look. The rest of the time, I stay in the room and don't socialize with anyone. As for the next 2 days..." Xiao Wenru looked up at Han Dan's beautiful little face and said, "As for the next 2 days, I will tell you what to report." "I understand." Han Dan's heart beat wildly twice, and she lowered her head again. She felt uneasy and always felt that there was something else in it. "It's good that you can understand. Big sister wants to compete for Prince Yu's mansion, but Prince Yu treats her normally now. Big sister has never been a person who admits defeat. If she can't enter Prince Yu's mansion, it's possible to stay in the palace. With big sister's appearance, it's very easy for her to occupy a position in the palace." Xiao Wenru's voice was as soft as flowing water, but Han Dan was overjoyed when she heard it. With a plop, she knelt down again, kowtowed to Xiao Wenru 3 times, and said in a trembling voice, "Thank you for your help, fifth miss." The master she wanted had never been from Prince Yu's mansion or other princes' mansions. She wanted to rely on the master in the palace. However, as a little palace maid, she couldn't stand in front of the favored nobles. It was best for her to gain the trust of the nobles and become their right-hand man before they showed up. She didn't want the first Miss Xiao to marry any prince. It was best for the first Miss Xiao to stay in the palace and follow the emperor. This was also the best way for her to make a name for herself. Fifth Miss Xiao was indeed smarter than the first Miss Xiao, and it was easier for her to see through her mind. This was also the meaning of fifth Miss Xiao's promise. How could she not be excited? Get up. Don't kneel. If someone asks why you kneel and kowtow to me when you see me, just say that you accidentally bumped into me. I'll scold you. Xiao Wenru looked around and said. There was no one around. It was a winding corridor. However, there were so many people in the palace that no one knew if there were people in other places who saw them. Thank you, Mississippi. I know. Han Dan increasingly felt that fifth Miss Xiao was almost inhuman. She had already thought of what she had thought or not, so she didn't dare to disobey her. Sure enough, it was right to come to fifth Miss Xiao's service today. Otherwise, with fifth Miss Xiao's means, she was afraid that she wouldn't even know how she died. Do you have the key to the room next to me? Xiao Wenru asked. I don't have it, but I know who has it. Han Dan had been completely convinced by Xiao Wenru at this time. As soon as she was asked, she immediately answered. For fear that Xiao Wenru didn't believe her, she deliberately said, Fifth Miss, which room do you want? I'll find a way to get it. The room next to my big sister's, which used to be my third sister's. Xiao Wenru raised the corner of her beautiful mouth and said, Yes, I'll find a way to get the key to third Miss Xiao's room right away. Han Dan nodded repeatedly. After that, she bowed to Xiao Wenru and turned to leave. This was the first time that fifth Miss Xiao had asked her to do something. How could she not do her best? You'd better get the key to my fourth sister's room too, Xiao Wenru said lazily. She narrowed her eyes and looked at the sun in the sky. It turned out to be another good day. Since she entered the palace, the weather had been good these days. Standing in the winding corridor, there was no wind, and the sun felt warm on her body. Fifth Miss, you want the keys to 2 rooms? Han Dan asked in confusion. She understood third Miss Xiao's room, but she didn't understand fourth Miss Xiao's room. You don't have to ask more. Just prepare the keys to both rooms. They will definitely be useful to you, Xiao Wenru said meaningfully. Seeing that Xiao Wenru didn't intend to explain, Han Dan came back with a stomach full of doubts. The more she thought about it, the more she couldn't understand why Xiao Wenru wanted the keys to 2 rooms. However, she was tempted by Xiao Wenru with threats and promises. At this time, she didn't dare to disobey Xiao Wenru. Standing at the intersection and thinking for a while, she went to find the nanny in charge. Stealing 1 key or 2 keys was also stealing. She should get the keys first. Since fifth Miss Xiao said so, she must have her reasons. Chapter 763. Qianqian update the latest chapter on the Crown Princess's medical skills as soon as possible. Chu Luiwei came over in the evening. He was not alone. With Chu Liuxin, they walked to the gate of Chuxiu Palace together. Big brother, this place looks really different from where we used to live. It's rare to have such a chance. I'd like to take a look. Chu Liuxin stopped and pointed at the palace gate with interest. Of course, he was mainly interested in people. Chu Luiwei frowned and was reluctant to enter the gate of Chuxiu Palace. He looked at the 3 huge characters at the gate of the palace and said, Fourth brother, it is not appropriate for us to be here now. If father knows it, he will definitely punish us again. What's wrong with that? They were originally chosen for us, so they should at least let us take a look. What's the point of just looking at the portrait? I heard that the previous dynasty even made the portraits of the beauties extremely ugly. Chu Liuxin said indifferently. In fact, he had always wanted to come and have a look. Today, he heard from Chu Luiwei that he had seen Miss Xiao outside the palace gate yesterday. After sending Miss Xiao, who had fallen, to Chuxiu Palace, he tried his best to persuade Chu Luiwei to come with him. Of course, he didn't want to see Xiao Yenru. However, they were both misses of Duke Xing's mansion, so they naturally lived together. Moreover, this portrait has not fallen into our hands yet. I don't know when it will end. Aren't you curious about what the girls in this draft look like? Chu Liuxin tried his best to persuade Chu Luiwei. They had already arrived at the gate of the palace, so how could they give up halfway? Miss Xiao, it's not a big deal. You don't have to see it, Chu Luiyue said with a cold face. I know. Of course, I know that the first Miss Xiao is fine, but there must be a reason, right? Since there is such a good reason and we have always been close to Duke Xing's mansion, we have to visit the first Miss Xiao and the fifth Miss Xiao. They entered the palace alone with only one servant girl to serve them. It's really pitiful. Chu Liuxin sighed. Chu Luiyue glanced at him speechlessly. He didn't understand why it was pitiful to enter the palace with a servant girl. Which beauty didn't enter the palace like this? Did she have to be accompanied by 7 or 8 servant girls? Hearing that Chu Liuxin deliberately added Xiao Wanru, he was not surprised. He had long known that Chu Luiyue had chased Xiao Wanru from Ru and Great Elder Princess Mansion to Duke Xing's mansion. Therefore, he used this to plot against Chu Liuxin. Why did Xiao Yanru insist on seeing him at this time? If that was the case, why didn't he say that he had been waiting outside for a long time yesterday? But he had to come here. Xiao Yanru was backed by Duke Xing's mansion, which was related to Duke Xing's mansion's attitude. Let's go. Waving his sleeves, he said helplessly and strode into Chuxiu Palace. Han Dan had seen the two princes come in and ran back excitedly to report to Xiao Yanru. Xiao Yanru had been waiting for Chu Luiyue to come. She had injured her foot and asked the nanny in charge for leave in the morning. The nanny in charge had already known that Prince Yu had asked someone to help Xiao Yanru come here yesterday and asked the imperial physician to treat her, so she naturally allowed her to ask for leave. From morning to afternoon, Xiao Yanru's face became more and more gloomy, and she was also very anxious. She couldn't help asking Shuqi to go there again. Why hadn't he come yet? At this time, did Chu Luiyue want to come to see her at night without being noticed? Hearing that Chu Luiyue had come, Xiao Yanru suddenly stood up with joy and asked, Really? Yes, not only Prince Yu, but also Prince Xian has come. They should be coming to First Mrs. Place. Han Dan said flatteringly. Okay, Shuqi, give him a reward. Xiao Yanru felt relieved again. Her face was no longer gloomy, and she gave an order to Shuqi with a smile. Shuqi answered and took out a pouch for Han Dan. Xiao Yanru had prepared a lot of such pouches. After entering the palace, she needed more people, so she couldn't be short of money. Han Dan took the pouch and left with great gratitude. When Chu Luiyue and his brother came over, Xiao Yanru had freshened up and was sitting in the chair in front of the window, reading a book of poems. There was a faint incense in the room. The window was slightly raised, making the incense more faint. In the wide-mouthed vase by the window, there was a red plum blossom. The red plum blossom was like fire and emitted a fragrance. The beauty beside the vase was like a king, and her delicate face reflected the red plum blossom, making them more attractive. So, what Chu Luiyue saw was the scene in front of him. The door was open, and he saw Xiao Yanru sitting in front of the window. She was as beautiful as jade and as beautiful as a flower. Sitting there pleasantly, she quietly read the book in her hand, like a picture of a quiet and peaceful time. Brother, why don't you go? Chu Liuxin anxiously poked his head out from behind Chu Luiyue and also saw Xiao Yanru sitting by the desk in front of the window. He said loudly, First Miss Xiao is really here. Chu Luiyue walked in, and Chu Liuxin hurriedly followed him. Xiao Yanru, who was sitting, seemed to be shocked. The book in her hand fell to the ground in astonishment, and she raised her bright eyes to look at Chu Luiyue, which were as clear as water. Shuqi, who was cleaning the room, hurriedly came out. When she saw the two princes, she hurriedly knelt down and said, Greetings, Your Highness Prince Yu and Your Highness Prince Xian. Get up, get up. Chu Liuxin waved his hand impatiently, looked around and said, Is fifth Miss Xiao not here? Xiao Yanru stood up and bowed sideways to them with some difficulty. It could be seen that her legs were not very convenient. After standing up, Shuqi hurriedly helped her up and let her finish the bow. After getting up, she said softly, Fifth sister is in her room. Which room is fifth miss in? Chu Liuxin's purpose of coming here today was to see Xiao Wanru. He immediately beamed with joy, regardless of why his brother beside him frowned more and more coldly. She is in the innermost room next to my room. If Prince Exen goes to see fifth sister, she will be very happy. Xiao Yanru raised the corner of her mouth and became more and more happy in her heart. Chu Liuxin was surprised. He had never hidden his affection for Xiao Wanru. After Xiao Wanru returned to the mansion, he had come here several times, but he had no chance or reason to see Xiao Wanru every time. I'm going to see fifth Miss Xiao. Chu Liuxin said excitedly, turned around and ran out, followed closely by his little eunuch, Xiao Liuzi. Chu Luiwei frowned more and more and looked at Chu Liuxin's back unhappily. Originally, he brought Chu Liuxin here because Chu Liuxin had feelings for Xiao Wanru. But at this time, he was in a bad mood, and his eyes were cold as if there was a storm. But he did not stop Chu Luiwei, because it was indeed inappropriate for Chu Luiwei to stay here. Prince Yu. Seeing that Chu Luiwei was still looking at the door, Xiao Yanru's eyes were full of jealousy, but then the jealousy turned into softness. She called him in a low voice and winked at Shuqi. Shuqi understood and walked to the door. Standing in her position, she could see that Prince Exen was standing at the door of the fifth miss and knocking on the door. The door seemed to be closed. How is your foot? Chu Luiwei coughed in a low voice, turned his head, and asked Xiao Yanru, How is your foot? Thank you for your concern, Your Highness. I've gotten much better. Xiao Yanru lowered her head. She wore a little thin clothes today, but she was in the room and there was a heater, so it was not a big deal. Her simple and elegant clothes not only made her graceful, but also made her slim waist. She lowered her head slightly, and her white and tender neck was exposed in front of Chu Luiwei, which made him feel extremely pitiful. Sit down first. Chu Luiwei sat in the chair opposite her and ordered in a low voice. Xiao Yanru said softly. She picked up the teapot on the table, poured a cup of tea for him, and then sat down. There were too many people yesterday, so I couldn't come in to see you. Today, with my fourth brother here, even if there is any gossip, it won't affect you. Chu Luiwei said. His words could be regarded as an explanation for his strange behavior yesterday. If he hadn't lost his temper and stopped Xiao Wanru, Xiao Yanru would have thought that his words were credible. But now she felt that his words were trying to cover up something. She took a deep breath and looked up with a delicate smile. She clearly knew that she should be gentle and well-behaved at this time, and she also knew how to make the man feel more pity for her. I know your difficulties, Your Highness. I won't misunderstand you, but you also know that my father... Xiao Yanru said hesitantly. What's wrong with your father? Chu Luiwei asked. My father was very angry after what happened to my third sister. He blamed me for not protecting her. Now there are only fifth sister and me left. In the future, fifth sister. My father also has an arrangement. As for me... Xiao Yanru said this and blushed. She gently pressed the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief, raised her beautiful eyes, and glanced at Chu Luiwei tenderly. The affection in her eyes was self-evident. Who is your father going to marry your fifth sister to? Chu Luiwei's heart skipped a beat, and he felt a little unhappy inexplicably. In fact, I don't know. It's just that great elder princess seems to agree with my father's idea. She mentioned Prince Xian. I don't know if it's what I understand. Xiao Yanru didn't give a definite answer. She hemmed and hawed and didn't say anything to the point, but it seemed to hit on some key points. She had wanted to say so. It was a pleasant surprise that Chu Liuxin came together today, which made people increasingly believe that it was true. Consort Ming won't agree. Chu Luiwei didn't like Xiao Yanru's hesitation and said bluntly. If Prince Xian likes it, you can go to the emperor to ask for a marriage. In addition, Ruan Great Elder Princess doesn't object, and my father doesn't object either. It should be possible. Seeing Chu Luiwei's look, Xiao Yanru's jealousy burned again. Her heart was burning fiercely, but she suppressed it with force and said in a gentle voice. You and your fifth sister can't marry into the royal family together. Chu Luiwei said unceremoniously. Be that as it may, but it is not without accident. I heard that there was such a thing in the past. Xiao Yanru's words became more and more vague, but it reminded Chu Luiwei of an old thing. He couldn't help but look cold. He knew what she was talking about. It had something to do with him. Rules were rules, but nothing was absolute. This kind of thing was actually not uncommon in the royal family. It happened in the previous dynasty, and it also happened in the current dynasty. Chapter 764. Chu Luwe was born by concubine Da. Concubine Da was the head of the 4 concubines. Except for the empress, she was the most respected one in the palace. But in fact, when she first entered the palace, concubine Da only had the lowest status, because she entered the palace with her sister. Her sister was the eldest daughter of lineal descent in the family, so she had a high status in the palace. As the second daughter of lineal descent, if it hadn't been for a special thing, she would not have entered the palace with her sister. 2 mansions could not have 2 concubines at the same time. Even if she entered the palace under special circumstances, she could only be suppressed as a small concubine. Compared with her sister, who entered the palace in Shenghua, she was just a small wave. But in the end, this wave became a monstrous wave that reached the heavens, and it even slapped her own sister to death in the wave. She stood out from the crowd, and no one remembered her esteemed sister. This was the story of concubine Da, but there was also the story of concubine Lon. It was said that the royal family was the most disciplined, but in fact, it was also the most unruly. When the rules encountered some special things, they would always give way to the rules. What nonsense are you talking about? Chu Luwe slapped the table heavily and said sternly, "Your Highness." Xiao Yanru was startled and looked at Chu Luwe in astonishment. Then her eyes turned red, and she sobbed with tears in her eyes. "Your Highness, what do you mean?" Chu Luwe calmed down, restrained the anger in his heart, and said in a gentle voice, "Can you talk nonsense about this kind of thing? It will be bad if others hear it. I know that your Highness is doing this for my own good." Xiao Yanru looked at Chu Luwe with tears in her eyes. She gently wiped her tears with a handkerchief and smiled shyly. "My father means, after I am with you, he will try his best. I am his only daughter, and he will always consider for me." Chu Luwe frowned and understood the meaning of Xiao Yanru's words. Duke Xing was an old fox. He looked kind and smiled at everyone, but he just didn't give a firm word. At present, this was a very firm word, but the premise was that he had to marry Xiao Yanru. He did want to marry Xiao Yanru before, and he had to do so for the sake of Duke Xing's mansion. However, after Xiao Yanru fell into the water in the Imperial Palace, he felt inexplicably tired of marrying Xiao Yanru again. Even if others didn't know it, Chu Liuzhou and Chu Qing both knew it. He felt that if he really married Xiao Yanru as his legal wife, he would definitely be ridiculed by Chu Liuzhou and Chu Qing in secret. Given Chu Liuzhou's character, he might even bring it up to stab him from time to time, making him feel that he was cuckolded. He looked down on Chu Qing, but when he thought that he was holding Xiao Yanru in his arms and saw more than one person in the water at that time, he felt that his throat was blocked. He couldn't swallow it or spit it out, and he felt uncomfortable. But he couldn't give up Xiao Yanru, especially what Xiao Yanru said just now could be said to be true. Whoever got Xiao Yanru would definitely get the support of Duke Xing, and it would be the support of that old fox without any hesitation. Give Xiao Yanru the position of a concubine? What about Xiao Wanru? His brain worked rapidly, and he had made a decision in his heart. Xiao Wanru would do him no good. With Xiao Yanru, he couldn't marry Xiao Wanru. Besides, he should take Chu Liuxin's reaction into consideration. When he sat in that high position, he could have all kinds of beauties. Even if he couldn't let go of her at that time, how could Chu Liuxin be his opponent? So what if he snatched her away? He reached out to hold Xiao Yanru's hand on the table and gently pinched it twice. His eyes softened and he said, "Don't worry. I will let you marry into my mansion. But you also know that there are some things that I can't completely decide. I will try my best to protect you from my father and mother, but if there is any accident, you have to believe me. Even if I am in a high position for a while, it is only temporary." "Your Highness, what do you mean?" Xiao Yanru raised her slightly red eyes and looked at Chu Luwe eagerly. Her watery eyes were full of affection. No matter how stone-hearted a man was, he couldn't help but want to hold her in his arms and cherish her. I'm just afraid in case. If there is any accident, you know that I only have you in my heart. In the future, everything will be yours. Chu Luwe knew that Xiao Yenru understood, so he comforted her softly. He couldn't give her the position of princess, but he could give her the position of concubine. Of course, he also knew that Xiao Yenru would not be satisfied. Not only Xiao Yenru, but also Duke Xing's mansion would not be satisfied. It was necessary to give them another big cake. Duke Xing hadn't taken sides for so many years and didn't respond to his obvious expression. Moreover, he kept Xiao Yenru here. Wasn't it obvious that he was choosing sides? He twitched the corner of his mouth and silently raised a trace of mockery. Duke Xing really dared to do this. What did he think of the descendants of the royal family? Thinking of this, he inexplicably hated Xiao Yenru. The charming face in front of him looked extremely unreal. The expression on her face should be what she was willing to show. Xiao Yenru had been smart since she was a child. When she was a child, she knew how to please him and Chu Liuzhou. She didn't care so much about Chu Liuxin. As for Chu Luchen, how could she please him? The feeling of being chosen was very bad. No matter how affectionate Xiao Yenru was, in front of him, Chu Luiyue felt inexplicably uncomfortable and fake. Don't worry, Your Highness. I'll listen to you. Xiao Yenru lowered her head and silently turned her head to wipe her tears. When she looked back, she was smiling, as if she had to listen to Chu Luiyue even if she had to force a smile. Chu Luiyue didn't notice that she was pulling the handkerchief in her hand so hard that it was almost pinched into her palm. Shuqi coughed hard and stepped aside. The two people in the room became quiet. Chu Luiyue calmly withdrew his hand, and Xiao Yenru also put her hand down and clasped it on her knee. Greetings, Your Highness Prince Xian and Fifth Miss. Seeing the figures at the door, Shuqi took another step back and bowed respectfully. Big brother, First Miss Xiao, Fifth Miss Xiao and I came here to talk with you. Chu Liuxin jumped in and waved his hand to signal Shuqi to dispense with the formalities. Behind him, Xiao Wanru walked in slowly, bowed respectfully to Chu Liuyue, and then called him Big Sister. Your Highness Prince Exen, please sit down. Fifth Sister, you also sit down. Xiao Yenru stood up and seemed to want to greet them. But she got up in a hurry, so her body shook and she almost fell down. Shuqi hurried over and reached out to hold her. Big Sister, you're still injured. Don't get up. Xiao Wanru said with a smile and sat down beside Xiao Yenru. Chu Liuxin also sat down beside Chu Luiyue. After he went to Xiao Wanru's room and knocked on the door, Xiao Wanru asked him to wait for a while and then followed him to Xiao Yenru's room. Looking at Xiao Wanru's soft and beautiful side profile, Chu Liuxin liked her more and more and felt that Xiao Wanru was a well-mannered girl. Fifth Miss, I was really impolite just now. I knew that you lived next door to the First Miss, so I came directly over. Chu Liuxin apologized. It was indeed his fault. It was not good for a man and a woman to be alone together. Your Highness Prince Exen, you're too polite. Xiao Wanru said with a smile casually. I'm not being polite. I'm really sorry. It's really inappropriate for the two of us to be alone in a room. It's better for us to be together with Big Brother and the First Miss. Chu Liuxin apologized sincerely. Fifth Miss, you are a well-mannered girl. I'm really sorry for offending you. Chu Liuxin thought so in his heart, so he just said so. When he finished speaking, he saw Chu Liuyue's cold look and Xiao Yenru's embarrassed look, and immediately came to his senses. At once, he cupped his hands to Chu Liuyue and explained with a smile, Big Brother, First Miss, of course, I'm not talking about you. The relationship between you two is unusual. It's okay even if you meet in private. He said it casually, but when he finished speaking, he found that he had said something wrong again. Xiao Yenru, who was opposite him, blushed and lowered her head even more. It seemed that there had been an affair between Chu Luiyue and Xiao Yenru for a long time. No, Big Brother, I didn't mean that. I mean that you are different from us. Seeing Chu Luiyue turn his eyes to him coldly, Chu Liuxin waved his hands and tried to salvage the situation again. Xiao Wanru smiled sweetly. His words seemed to add insult to injury again, exposing the relationship between Chu Luiwei and Xiao Yenru in broad daylight. Having an affair between a man and a woman was against the first Miss Xiao's usual dignified behavior. But now she couldn't explain it. Feeling ashamed and resentful, she could only lower her head and almost bury it. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Chu Luiwei reprimanded her unhappily. He glanced at Xiao Wanru and found that she was still smiling as if she was watching a good show. He became more and more displeased. "Big brother, I'm not talking nonsense. I saw a portrait of the first Miss Xiao in your study before." Chu Liuxin said with a smile, stole a glance at Xiao Yenru, and stretched out a thumb to gesture to Chu Luiwei. He had always been close to Chu Liuxin, and Chu Liuxin was also very kind to him, the youngest brother. There were some things that others didn't dare to say, but he would say what he thought. Xiao Yenru held the handkerchief in her hand and felt that the annoyance in her heart immediately disappeared. At this time she really blushed. Prince Yu had always been interested in her and even drew a portrait of her. When he didn't see her, he must have looked at the portrait. Then what he said just now was true. Even if she couldn't get a high position now, so what? Prince Yu had her in his heart and only she was in his heart. A temporary low position was nothing. She would definitely be the one who had the last laugh. Chu Liuxin inadvertently solved Xiao Yenru's hesitation just now. Xiao Wanru looked at the scene in front of her calmly, raised her eyebrows, and silently acted as a bystander. Suddenly, she subconsciously raised her head and met Chu Liuwei's cold eyes. "Well, don't talk nonsense. There's no such thing." Chu Luiwei didn't want to explain at first, but at this time, he didn't know why he blurted it out. He didn't like Xiao Wanru's eyes, which seemed to be watching a good show. Xiao Wanru lowered her eyes calmly and no longer paid attention to the interaction between Chu Luiwei and Xiao Yenru. However, Chu Luiwei seemed to stare at her angrily, and his eyes followed her movements closely. Xiao Yenru looked up shyly, but what she saw was not Chu Luiwei's affectionate gaze on her, but his attentive gaze on Xiao Wanru. Her heart skipped a beat and she thought of the scene in the pavilion yesterday. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.